everybody. Wow, this is new. It's really loud. I'd like to welcome everybody to the school board meeting Tuesday, January 26, 2021. Tonight, we're going to begin at 6 o'clock with a board workshop, so I'm going to call the workshop to order. And with that, Lupe Ramirez is going to lead us in the flag salute. Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, Lupe. Item 2 is a roundtable discussion among board members and staff addressing the following topic. This is going to be for discussion only with no action, and the topic is curriculum that matters, preparing college and career-ready students. You going to lead us off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, President Casiopo. This is Tasha Fuson for the record, Associate Superintendent, Educational Services. I have 2 colleagues with me for this presentation. I have Allie Cadwell. She is our curriculum coordinator for social studies, and Jennifer Chandler, who is a teacher and the social studies department chair at Carson High School. So thank you for having us. What we really want to talk about today is Goal 2 of our district strategic plan. I know this is not new to all of you, but that goal focuses on curriculum that matters. And that really is the driving force behind the work that I do with my team in Ed Services. So in particular, tonight, we're going to talk about Objective 2.1, which is prioritizing proficiency when planning and implementing curriculum based on the Nevada academic content standards and ensuring that all students will participate in meaningful, relevant curriculum. So we wanted to specifically focus on what does that mean in the Carson City School District? What does that look like? And in particular, with our 5 strategies. So we are tasked with our strategic plan to provide curriculum, materials, resources, and tools that align with the Nevada academic content standards and 21st century. We are working on personalizing student learning opportunities through the learner-centered model, project-based learning, and authentic applications. We provide professional learning opportunities for our staff to be able to implement that effectively. We provide safe and consistent learning environments that promote social and emotional wellness. And we have to comprehensively evaluate our curriculum materials, resources, and assessment tools on a regular basis. So that is what Goal 2 is about. Quite robust. And the thing about curriculum is sometimes people don't really understand what that means, right? Everyone knows what it looks like to be in a classroom. Everyone knows what it looks like for a teacher to teach, but sometimes they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. And that's really what curriculum instruction and assessment is all about, is what goes on behind the scenes as well as then what you see in the classroom. The one thing I wanted to point out, and you've seen this grid before, is that another question that often comes up, right, is why once teachers go through the process of teaching a year and they get their curriculum underneath them or behind them and they understand what it is and they start to lesson plan and okay, we should be golden for, I don't know, until the teacher retires. That's sometimes the thought. But in reality, at the state level, our state is the body that adopts the standards for our state. And that is actually the adoption for all of our core curricular areas and elective curricular areas are done on a cycle of about 7 years. So what you see in front of you is a grid that I actually received because I'm part of the state's instructional material steering committee. So we are tasked with adopting instructional materials at the state level every time standards are assessed or readopted. So you can see the coding on the bottom. But in essence, my whole point in saying this is you can see that we've actually, as a state, kind of structured out every year, at least 1, if not 2, different sets of standards are being reviewed, okay? And so that means, for instance, in an elementary school, you might have an elementary teacher who received English language arts standards this year that they start to flush out, unwrap, really start to try to understand and dive in. We come up with our curriculum framework. We start working through that process, which usually takes a couple of years, but then the following year, math trails behind, and the following year, social studies. So it is a constantly evolving task for teachers to do and as a district for us to work on. So I wanted to explain that particular part. And again, that's controlled at the state level. So it's not, something that the districts choose to do. We don't all of a sudden go, you know what, it sounds like a good idea. Let's just buy new science materials and let's try to, revamp our science program. It's actually driven by this particular curriculum development cycle. So you've often heard in the time that I've worked for our district, especially when I was the principal at Carson High School, that as a school, we had 192 individual courses. Well, okay, what does that mean? And actually, in this particular case, in our district-wide, there's 320 individual courses that are taught that have to be developed. And you can see the breakdown. So in English language arts, we have 32, in math, 30, science has 36, social studies, 27, computer science alone, there's 9 separate courses. Career and technical education, there's 81. ELL has 8 specific courses, then fine arts, 45, PE and health, 28, world languages, 13, our special ed CLS courses, 11. If you're wondering about resource level courses, I've actually put them underneath their core curricular area or their attached curricular area. And we have actually not, to date, really addressed pre-K or kinder when it comes to unwrapping the standards. I mean, obviously, they're more about structured play and interaction and that kind of thing. But we haven't, when I'm talking about these courses, I'm not even addressing pre-K or kinder. So the reason why it's color-coded, what you're seeing is on the left-hand side, that those in black, those are course areas, subject areas, that have curriculum coordinators assigned, like Allie. So Allie is our curriculum coordinator for social studies. On the right-hand side, in the purple, are areas that don't have a specific curriculum coordinator assigned. We actually use what we call PLC leads, and we pay teachers responsibility pay for hours that they put in outside of class time or outside of their regular day to lead like PLC meetings across sites. But when you start talking about the unwrapping of the standards and developing curriculum, we do have to take one of the curriculum coordinators that we have and reassign them or assign them over to help. So for instance, I'm going to use Allie as an example anyways, because here she is. I earlier this year asked Allie, we really need to focus on world languages. We haven't done a lot of work around curriculum development and for that team. So I need you, in addition to having the 27 social studies courses that you're working on, I need you to pick up world languages too. And by the way, we just got new health standards, K-12, so now we have to unwrap those standards and figure that out as well. So I just wanted you to know that's why they're color-coded up there. So altogether, again, 320 individual courses for our district alone. So what does it take to articulate a course? That's what we call building a curriculum framework for that course. Well, once new standards are adopted, our curriculum process begins. In order to articulate just one single course, you have to take the state standards, you have to unwrap them, which means you have to then come up with a shared understanding of all teachers. For instance, you have first grade teachers across 6 elementary schools. There's about 25, 26 elementary first grade teachers. They all have to understand that what that standard means the same thing to all of them, so that then they can teach it. So it doesn't matter if you're at Boardwalk Bray or Fritch or Fremont, your first grader is getting guaranteed and viable curriculum around that standard, regardless of what site you're at. So we have to unwrap the standards, which means we develop learning targets and units of instruction. We have to plot the course scope and sequence for the whole course. So how do you fit all of those standards into one school year? Then we have to design course assessments. And then you also have to take into account course alignment. So it's not enough just to say, okay, here's your first grade curriculum. We also have to take a look at, for instance, things from a horizontal perspective. So you have world history, you have world history honors. What makes the difference between those two courses? And from a vertical perspective, in this particular case, we have world history, U.S. government. What does that mean, and what skills have to transfer from grade to grade and build on the skills? And what content knowledge does a student have to learn in world history to be successful in U.S. history? Then you also have to look at interdisciplinary skills. So in social studies and English, for instance, that's an example. If you're going to be taking a literature class in a junior year on, and you're taking U.S. history, we want to make sure that those are compatible with each other, you might do American Lit because you want to make sure that they have those ties. So you're looking at interdisciplinary content as well as skills, and then really doing a systemic job, which is intentional alignment of all of those things. So again, at this point in time, you're probably going, still, I hear what you're saying, but what we had for you today is an exemplar that we're going to share. So within our social studies department, the two ladies, the professionals I have sitting next to me, have been working for quite some years now. We started with the Race to the Top process, and both of us have been with us throughout that whole time. But to really, again, not just take a look at, so Jenny's the high school department chair, so you might think she only has to take a look at 10th, 11th, and 12th, but not really, because even from her role as a government teacher, she has to know what's taught kinder all the way through 11th grade to know where her students need to be by the end of 12th grade. So what you're seeing here is, for instance, just kind of a picture of what that means to vertically align and why, when you look at how many social studies courses there are, what we're talking about, right? And then also, as you can tell underneath, it says, for students to improve scores on high-stakes tests, constantly and consistently, it's essential that they learn skills in sequence and transfer their learning from one course to another. So it's again, it's not about, here's your standards teacher, just teach what's on the paper. There is a lot of work that goes into the back end. So to really paint that picture for you, we're going to actually walk you through an exemplar, because these two wonderful women next to me, as well as our world history honors teachers in our district, just spent 3 years articulating the world history honors course. It took 3 years to actually come up with a full, well thought out, well articulated course. Okay, and so we're going to explain to you what that means and what that looks like. I want you to know we'll give you an opportunity as we go. There's several times throughout this presentation where we stop and pause so that you can get questions and comments, but there is a lot of information. So I will warn you that because we wanted you to actually see what it means to really flesh out one course. And again, keep in mind we have 320. Okay. Oh.
Is this on? Okay. Hi, I'm Allie Cadwell, K-12 Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator. Let's see. So, one of the slides on here, but you also have access to all of the handouts that are on here. There's electronic versions here, and so there's a landing document on the second slide of this portion of the presentation that you can always go back and get an electronic version. And so what we wanted to talk with you today about are all of the considerations that go into creating a course at this level. This is an honors social studies course. And my job really deals with sort of the overarching big picture systemic view. So I can speak well to that. And then Jenny, being a classroom teacher, she is gonna think about the things that went into looking at a student taking the course and opening the gates and letting all students, rise to the occasion of a rigorous course. She'll speak to the student-centered, and then in general, just some things that we have noticed together as we're working through with our teachers, things that have been really useful and helpful and that we just want to make everyone aware of. So in 2017, the standards were revised with the state. And when I say revised, they were extreme. It was really more of a full redo, even though it fell under the umbrella of revision, just the state terminology. But so what that meant was we really had to go back and really look at what we were teaching, how we were teaching it, and the rigor that we were teaching at. And so it's called the C3 framework, which is college, career, and civic life. And it's really based off of Common Core standards, but it really hones in on the social studies disciplinary skills that we want all of our students to walk away from to be college and career ready and to be civic participants in the United States. So there's 4 dimensions of inquiry. They're very inquiry-based with these disciplinary skills. There's a whole arc that we won't get into great detail with, but it basically has, you teach kids to ask questions, you teach kids to investigate and research and revise. They're looking at whether they are quality, all the quality, what is that called? Credibility, thank you. Credibility of sources, those kinds of things. And then the big one is to apply your knowledge and ideas through taking, it's called informed action, which looks all different, but it's a way to really apply your knowledge from the other elements that you've learned. And so we really had to really rework and revamp all of our social studies courses at that time. And we were also, it was a perfect time because we also had to align K-12 so that we have a systemic way to know that kids are where they need to be in whatever grade they're in, that they're getting ready to move forward in the grade levels with social studies. So here's an example of our old standards, and these are the closest match, kind of very similar to what you'd see with all of them. The key words that are highlighted are sort of the rigor of that particular standard. So words like examine and explain are pretty low level because it's really a lot of rote memorization. It's sort of a lower depth of knowledge. You're just kind of regurgitating what you learned and what you were able to retain in your class notes and that kind of thing. If you look at the new standards, the types of things you see is compare the evolution within and across. So much, much deeper. A lot more, it's not something you could necessarily write down. It's something you would have to use what you've learned and sort of be able to explain in a more deep way where you're comparing things like that. The other piece are the disciplinary skills that I mentioned. They are banded 9 through 12, so they look the exact same for grades 9 through 12. They're banded for 6-8, they look the exact same. So you can really start building through those grade levels to get more and more complex as you go through the grades. And so here's an example of one of ours is, I can evaluate the benefits and consequences of a country's struggle for democracy. And so that's, I don't know if that's not actually a disciplinary skill. So I'm sorry, I messed up. That's not really one. But it's basically, this is just, I'm sorry, that's how we translated it to a learning target. I'm sorry, I should read my own thing. So we take the standard and then create a learning target with it. And so the way that we fleshed it out into student-friendly language is I can evaluate the benefits and consequences of a country's struggle for democracy. And so you'll notice it's not within and across nations. This is really focusing on one country, because then later on you would expand it to compare another country. I'm sorry, that was really confusing. Here's an example of the disciplinary skills. And so the 4 arcs are on the left there of the disciplinary skills with the inquiry and the questioning, and then the gathering sources, developing claims, and using evidence. And then the last 2 are part of the last part of the arc, which is communicating and critiquing conclusions and taking informed action. And so when I say they were all banded, even though this says world history on there, WH.1, WH.2, they're actually the same. It would say US.1, and then civics is a CIV.1. So it's all the same, but they just attach it to that particular set of standards for that content is why. And so you can see students are doing really high level, they're practicing really high level skills there. And here's a question stop. And I can go back to the skills if you need.
So at this point in time, what we're hoping you kind of understand is the complexity of the standards that our teachers are given. So what Allie showed you was literally one standard. And for each course, there's anywhere from, I don't know, maybe Yeah, 40 to 60 is what Jenny's saying. That's even higher than I was going to say. I was going to say about 27 and above. So it depends on the course. So 40 to 60, that's an example of one. And then you take those standards, and again, looking at those disciplinary skills, which are banded, and have to determine what level that looks like at ninth. What does it look like a student can do at ninth grade within that skill continuum, to what it should look like when they're a senior in that skill continuum. And then attach that to those 40 to 60 standards in a way that your teachers understand what they mean, enough that they can explain it to kids so that kids understand what it means. And that's just for people to understand even what they're supposed to teach, let alone tie it to instructional strategies in the classroom, let alone tie it to materials in the classroom. So that's that first part. We're going to talk about some of the other considerations that have to take place, but is there any questions on the standard, the specific standards, or what standards look like? Okay. Again, it's just, I think it's important for everyone to understand, community members, board members, even our own teachers, that, you know, sometimes it sounds so easy. Oh, you just take your standards and you teach your standards. And all our educators just sit there and scratch their head and go, yeah, if it was only that simple, right? So here's some of the complexity that goes into it.
Okay. So now we're going to look at the way that the skills are broken down. So we've seen them, you've had a chance to see them laid out, but again, like kind of what Tasha was saying is, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so some of the words that are up in that slide are just the recurring words in the skills that we work on throughout an entire school year. You start basic, and then they just gradually get more and more advanced. And then, okay, do I need to click on that? Or do, oh. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, you guys have a printed copy. Perfect. So there's a spreadsheet that shows the skills. Thank you. Just close it. I'll let you. Okay. And what those skills are showing is a very detailed description of, yes.
So I apologize since it's not coming on the screen. In your packet, the one that looks like this chart is what she's referring to.
And that is just a snippet that our honors teachers have worked out and are using this school year to take those disciplinary skills and break it down so that as a student is entering at the beginning of the school year, depending on what unit they're teaching, what is the skill that they're focusing on and what are they doing? And that is only showing a couple of the, oh no, it is all there. Okay, so that is all the skills. If you keep going through the document, it's a couple pages. That's what our teachers, that's how they envisioned to lay out those skills separate from the content standards, because the content can really be applied with those skills. Depending on the skill that you're working on, then your content is added in and you're doing the activities that are going to help work with a student with those skills. And so that's what it looks like when you're taking it just from that sheet of paper to now a spreadsheet and spiraling through and increasing the rigor as you go. It gets harder and harder, and students are given more and more kind of freedom to branch out and do more difficult things as the year goes on. So some of the ways that we looked at rigor to build the rigor for this honors course, not only did we have to first understand what does the regular world history class look like and what are they going to be learning, because our honors students also need to learn that same content, but we also had to look at different types of AP exams, certification exams. Some of the things were the Jumpstart exams, the ACT exams, looking at AP US history. So if you've got a kid that's gonna start, the honors program as a 10th grader, because we don't have 9th grade social studies, so they're starting, if they chose to start honors in 10th grade, we want them to be able to access and be successful in AP US history. So what does that really look like to get a kid to jump to those higher levels. We also looked at some of the CTE courses as well in terms of the skills. And then we also, in terms of rigor, and this is not super important in terms of your understanding, really the understanding for what's called a cognitive rigor matrix is more for administrators and classroom teachers to be able to speak the same language. So when we're looking at a really rigorous course, they look a lot different. The teacher is really probably not talking as much because students are doing a lot more and they're doing the exploration and the collaboration. And so we use these rigor matrices, and they come in all subject areas that Tasha is showing you there. And so as you start up in the top left corner, those are kind of the lower level activities. And then as you work your way to the bottom right corner, those become more and more rigorous and high level activities. And it's blending a couple of different DOK with Bloom's taxonomy, metacognitive type stuff. But really, just so you know, like these are things that teachers, we look at. And so if you're struggling, okay, this is something a teacher can refer to because it gives really great ideas of what it might look like. And an administrator can look at that if a teacher is struggling, or if they're having a conversation about, well, what was that? I've never seen that before. That's a great common place to go and talk about what they were looking at. And so we wanted you to see that. So here is just a super great visual of how this honors, or how our world history program at 10th grade social studies is sort of like the roots that all of our social studies classes stem from, because we don't have that 9th grade and we have so many places that we want to get our kids to. And so this was just a nice visual to show of all the different classes that we offer and the things that we take into account when we're making the world history and the honors world history. Like, it's such an important course because we have to get them ready for all these different options. And it's a lot of work. And we've added some, like AP Human Geography is new this year. So it's super exciting that we've got that new AP course as well. And we do consider it a gateway course because we try to open it up for many different, any population that would like to take, English language learners. We value and want them in there. Students with individualized education plans, we want them in there. We have ways that we can make things work because we have kind of opened up that opportunity for those kids, and social studies is sometimes a good place to do that, to where we have, it's not so linear as maybe like a math course or something like that. We have ways that we can, and we are spiraling through our skills and things through the whole thing. And another question, Ariana.
So at this point in time, again, our next part is going to actually dive into curriculum considerations. So this in particular piece, we are just really wanting to lay out for you the way that we dive into making sure that the appropriate level of rigor is represented in the course. So President Cassiopo, you have mentioned to me over the years that we've known each other at times, right? How are we preparing students for the ACT, or how do we prepare them for the SBAC, and how do we make sure they can perform at that level? Well, one of the biggest parts to that is making sure that the appropriate level of rigor is reflected in the classroom instruction that's going on. And again, making sure that you're stair-stepping that. So what I mean by that is the level of rigor will look different in a regular honors class, a regular world history class versus the honors world history class versus an AP human geography class, which students can take all when they're sophomores. And so we have to really articulate that so that our teachers understand that, and that we can then appropriately place students in classes. So we want to always challenge our students to take the most rigorous classes that they can handle, but we also don't want to overwhelm them. and overload them, right? Drown them with courses that are just way too difficult. But we're also wanting to make sure no matter what class you take within our high school system, right, in our district, that you are prepared and will enter college without having to take remedial classes. So that is a big lofty goal to say, okay, our regular world history class has to be able to prepare our students so that they can score high enough on the ACT, which is the reading part of the ACT, which is the predictor for social sciences when you go into college, right? And say, okay, how can we really kind of tackle that reading ACT as it relates to world history to prep our kids, and then step that up for honors world history. What does that look like? Then step that up for AP. So it's quite, again, it's quite a task to really be able to have our curriculum laid out that way, so that our teachers understand that, and then also so that it's reflected in instruction in the classroom. So this next part, we're going to dive into the actual curricular aspect of that. But as Allie was trying to allude to in that particular piece, right, is making sure that from an equity standpoint, that we're not saying, okay, Tasha, you are from, you're on an IEP, and therefore you can't take this class. Absolutely not. Right? The intent is to say, well, this is the skills we know you need in order to be successful in this class, so how do we get you there? And the same thing with our English language learners, as an example, right? What language skills do you need to be successful in this course? And if we can't articulate that ourselves, then how do we help our students set goals to get there? Or how do we explain to our families what Tasha needs to do to prep to be able to take that college prep class, or to go in that avenue, or be able to participate in jumpstart classes, early college studies, that kind of thing. So again, that's that piece, is that we really have to break that down by discrete skills, understanding what that skill looks like at each one of those levels, so we can help our students be placed in an appropriate level for them, and also help them aim to the next level. Okay? And so what that means from a curricular standpoint, I think we're going to jump into that, and then it might start making a little bit more sense. It'll be a little more concrete.
Well, I got so many, whoa, now I feel like, yes, I'd like to accept my, Grammy. No, sorry. So as we start looking and we start digging down, as a teacher, the question is like, well, how common is common, right? And what about my pacing? And how do I align to the courses that come before and after me? And so when we were taking this course and trying to build it, this was the first kind of problem we had to solve. How do you do the same but not the same? And so when we look at alignment, we need all of our kids to cover the same base material, because as they go further, sometimes they're like, okay, well, I'm not a social studies kid, so I'm kind of donezo with the honors, and I want to step down a level because I want to put other things in different places on my plate. So we can't go rogue, if you will, and just kind of take off on a different path, because it cuts off pathways for the student choice going forward. So our pacing matches the regular course, and then they get all the same exams as the regular students, but we add additional questions, content questions, that go deeper. And so we look at depth of knowledge. And so, for example, the question type and distribution on a basic, like multiple choice style test would look a little bit different, based on the type of course that a student would be taking. Then we look at the skills, and the skills are the real nitty-gritty, hands-on. Can you think like a historian? What's a source? Where do I find one? How do I know it's credible? And then how do I use it? And so the pacing is very different in the skills, because it doesn't take as long for students to catch on. They don't need as much practice. And so we rev the engine, so to speak, in the skills to bring them up to speed so that they have all of those opportunities going forward. So it was really challenging to go, I got to get a 10th grader to write a 10-page research paper and cite it in MLA and APA so that they are ready for that jumpstart class, so that we can try to be a shock absorber about, like, you're headed into your college GPA. You don't want to mess this up, right? And so we really looked at those types of things. So the learning progressions look a little bit different. As you saw that earlier, like, large chart, I took some snippets here to kind of show you we don't just say like, write a thesis. Okay, next assignment, write a thesis, write a thesis. You finish the class, you wrote a thesis, right? The expectations for the discrete skills advance as they go on in the course so that we guarantee that every student is making a certain amount of growth in their skill level as they go with we kind of look at it as an on-ramp so that when they get up to speed, if they want to jump into AP the next year, they're fine. If they want to stay on the same track, they've got, like, the toolkit is full no matter which path they take. And then we have progressive rubrics, right? No coasting. The rubric descriptors have to gradually increase in rigor across all the skills. That's a mentally exhausting waffle of rubrics to look at and go, what does it look like to do this when you start and, you know, when you're finished? Like, think of the horrors of letting your teenager learn to drive, right? What's a good pull out and turning the corner when you start versus when you finish, right? Sometimes it takes a little longer than others, right? So as you think of these pieces, do you have any questions? What, this one?
I'll go around and get
Oh,
you. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So at this particular point, what we're hoping to illustrate for you is that sometimes people often think too, okay, well, especially when we first rolled out the new Nevada Academic Content Standards, or the Common Core State Standards, and our teachers didn't have instructional materials. Okay, we all remember that time because at that point in time, the publisher companies actually hadn't come up with instructional materials that matched the Nevada Academic Content Standards or Common Core State Standards. It took them a while to catch up. So, you know, we've gone through a lot of instructional materials adoptions. So quite often then the thought is, okay, well, I'm a teacher. You gave me, here's this new textbook, HMH, and shouldn't I then just put the student in page 1 or part 1 of it, and we're going to go through part 1 through, you know, page 500 or the end of it, and then I've taught what I'm supposed to teach. The interesting thing about this is the fact that sometimes people don't understand textbooks are written for the whole country and sometimes internationals, right? Different states have different standards. Different countries have different standards. So to say that your textbook is your standards is absolutely incorrect. So what has to happen, and what I hope you're starting to see, is the thought process behind, okay, here's the standard. What does the standard mean? What does it reflect in terms of the knowledge that our students are supposed to have, but also the skill that our students need to have? How is that vertically articulated between kinder to first to second to third, all the way up to the senior year? And Jenny's planning for beyond, so what does it look like in college? And then how do we need to come up with an assessment system or a way to be able to evaluate that? And then you have to match your textbook to everything else that you've planned out. Textbook doesn't come first. Textbook comes last. We've mapped out what our standards say our students have to know and be able to do. And now we pick instructional materials or a textbook that match that as best as it can. But our teachers often have to supplement with other materials. Because if you teach solely to a textbook company and then expect that you're going to get results on an SPAC assessment or an ACT assessment, your teachers can work really, really, really hard on the wrong things. Okay? So there is not an alignment between what our SBAC assesses and what HMH reading materials that publishing company put out. Are they somewhat the same? Sure they are, right? They're somewhat parallel, but they're not identical. So we have to be able to evaluate that and help our teachers identify where those holes are, where their weakness is. And then also, and whether or not it's written at the right level of rigor. Again, you're talking about a textbook company who goes, we have to plan for all these people, and we're going to put this together, right? They never intend for you to teach it from page 1 to page 500. So those are the other pieces. So when Jenny starts to talk about, we're sharing with you the learning progressions, that's literally a teacher taking into account and says, okay, in this particular case, in her example, thesis, right? The thesis matches adequately and addresses the assigned prompt. That's the very first step of that. Then, line of reasoning. The set of claims together make a logical argument explaining the thesis. So I'm not going to read all those to you, but you get the point is that you have to go, what is the base skill that the student need to know and be able to do before they can do the next one? And what do they have to know at that next level before they can do the next one? Because if you have a student who doesn't have that first stair step and you throw them right into that last one, they're going to fail. They're going to fail. They don't have the skill to do it. So if you don't know what the actual learning progression is and understand that as a teacher, and you can assess what it is, and then remediate instruction, or not even necessarily remediate, but fill in the learning holes for the student, then you're setting your student up for failure. So that's what that learning progression gets to. So now we're unwrapping it, not even the content, not even the skill, but then the sub-skills, the learning progressions that it has to take in order for the student to perform at a high enough level of rigor that it reflects what is being assessed in an SBAC or an ACT. So, and then the rubrics that Jenny was sharing with you, that's how we actually have to then, you don't want to hold a kid accountable for what they're supposed to know at the end of the year on day one, or our students would all be failing. They'd start whatever grade level, in this particular case, first day of sophomore year, right, in honors world history, and if you didn't have progressive rubrics and you just graded them based on what they need to know at the end of the year, they'd all start out with an F. How do you think our teenagers would do with that concept? Not well. How do you think our families and our parents would accept that? Not well. So then you actually have to have progressive rubrics that says at this particular point in time, this is what the skill level of the student looks like. A month later, at this point in time, this is what the skill level is supposed to look like. Another month later. So you're building those pieces out as well. Okay, so those are other curricular considerations that we take into account. And we haven't even gotten to lesson planning. I just want you to know that. That's what I'm saying. Think about it from a teacher's perspective. We haven't even gotten to actually writing a lesson plan. This is just the thought that has to go behind even before you start that. So our next part is we're going to jump into, unless you have questions, we're going to jump into consideration of student needs and consideration of teacher needs. And then hopefully you'll be able to have all those pieces together, and we're happy to answer any questions. So those are our last kind of two tidbits to make up the whole.
When you start putting this together, you can get everything together on paper, but then when you're facing the class, it becomes readily apparent that there's soft skill work that you need to do, right? And so when you're trying to equip students to do all of these things, one of the things that would happen is you come in as a teacher and you're like, well, this kid's not organized and they don't know how to keep themselves under control. And so we adopted a let's come up with solutions type of an approach, and you'll find that handout in your packet. We decided it was important to articulate the soft skills of, okay, well, if this is your first time in an honors class, it's different. Like, you don't just get the little GPA bump. There's a set of expectations that come with it. And as teachers, sometimes we fall into the pattern of like, we know that, we've taught for lots of years, but kids have no idea. And so one of the things we talked about, and I think this is really important, especially in relation to helping them on their high stakes assessments, you use all your learning all the time. Like, you know what your English teacher taught you, it still holds true in my class. It just looks different. And, when we look at a graph or something in world history, that's the same skills your science teacher taught you. And when we're looking at stats, your math teacher, so helping kids know, remember when you learned world history in 6th grade? We're still same concepts, right? And kids don't seem to transfer that knowledge very well without us pointing that out to them. And so as part of the articulation process, I will tell you as a classroom teacher, knowing what they called it in 3rd grade and what they called things and skills and how they approached it in 6th grade helps me get so much farther with my 10th graders, because sometimes you're calling it something different and they're not making the transfer and they are lost and you cannot figure out where you left them by the side of the road. Recognizing the uniqueness, being proactive rather than reactive. Planning, right? You need to write it down. You need to plan. Maybe we shouldn't do everything the night before. Parents would love this stuff, right? We realized in world history, one of our struggles with kids was it's a ton of information coming at them. And so we put a lot of effort into note-taking. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but I can see where you would look in different courses and go, this is what my kindergartens need. This is what 6th grade needs. This is what CTE kids need in their intro course. That's not necessarily something that is verbally articulated in a standard, but I can't get them to the standard if they don't have this in their toolkit. Academic integrity, ownership of their learning, self-regulation. So that became readily apparent, and we have had tremendous success with light bulbs going on above kids. And sometimes we get accolades from parents of, I've been trying to get them to use a calendar their whole life. This is amazing, right? So sometimes it's a great community bridging conversation, because then you know what we call it. And so then you can call it the same thing. And so it's kind of a unifying experience. As we considered access, we're really focusing on what if someone hasn't come in from an honors class? That's a completely new feel. And as a teacher, it's like trying to figure out how to drive a stick shift, because you're like, well, I was going and then we were lurching, and some kids are with me and some kids are not with me. And so we had to put the pieces in there to help those kids kind of seamlessly begin to fit right in. Any questions about the student piece of it? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Just a comment I was going to make. The maintaining the same. This is really loud.
It's very, very loud, right?
Maintaining the same language. I'll back up a little bit. I'm used to standing getting really close so you can hear with my mask. But maintaining the same language through each grades, I'm sure that helps our English learners as well, and any of the other kids with that too. But that's great.
Like afraid of feedback now, right? So as we went through the process, we felt it was important to kind of highlight some teacher needs, because this is time-intensive, exhausting work, but it's tremendously rewarding. And so we wanted to kind of close out by pointing out some things, particularly like as Allie and I sit here together as a team, she does things that I don't have time for and can't do in my day as a curriculum coordinator. So Allie, I will, here, you can have this.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you talk about your job, and then I'll talk about my job.
All right. So I do a lot of, big picture organizing and getting people set up to meet at different grade levels. And those cross middle school, high school conversations are huge. And teachers having time to have 6th grade early world civilization teachers being able to talk to 10th grade world history teachers is so important, because we can start having those conversations. We've added economics to our curriculum. And so finding out where, as econ has become a course that's rolling, where are those pieces that we can build economics knowledge? And you just don't know that until you have that time. So, I mean, literally setting up right now Zoom meetings, but, meetings in general with varied groups of teachers at different grade levels, making sure we're following state laws and processes. Like the newest one is the civics test, making sure that all the teachers that we have a civics test to give and that we're gonna be able to report to you and all those good things. Creating benchmarks, benchmark assessments, fixing benchmark assessments, adjusting, just adjusting as we're learning and adjusting and figuring out the standards and the scope and sequence, things that need to be it. There's always something that we're never done. Our job is never done in any view of education. It's a dynamic field that is constantly changing. Setting up professional learning for teachers and finding out what they need, what's going to work best, taking care of or heading up instructional materials adoption and training for that, so that we're using well the resources that we've purchased. All those kinds of things are where I'm sort of spending a lot of my time.
And I'd just like to point out too, for instance, I've just read through recently 3 different bills that would impact the social studies department if they get passed, which is including like removing government out of the social studies and adding, I don't know, we already have financial literacy and we already have multicultural education, but they're going to add civics instead of government. So we catch up on that. And just even when we finished developing the government's course, it might not even from the standards review cycle go out. It might go out because of a legislative change. So we stay up on all of those as well and make sure that we as a district are compliant.
once we do all of that, I have to take it into the classroom and make it work for kids, right? And so we take these assessments and we run with them, but it's important to her part of the job that she gets feedback from me, like nothing worked today, or everybody got number 12 wrong, or so cool that we have this tool and we got so many different high-tech options that mirror those high-stake tests. We work out the learning progressions because we're hands-on with the kids. And we work through, okay, now that it's all on paper and it's all lined up, what does it need to look like? And do a lot of changing out of different activities to give the kids the biggest bang for the buck, so that going forward, the kids are ready, but also so I do justice to all of those that came before me, right? Of all the work that started at the pre-K level that brings them up to me and allows me to do what I do. So here are the 3 things that really stuck out in our mind. Particularly for the Honors World History course, I had a lot of teachers that are like, I've never taught an honors course before. I thought that was just where you get the smart kids, right? But with our open access approach, you're getting any type of kiddo in there, and you need more tools in your box that maybe you didn't get with your master's degree or you didn't get through your teacher program that really focus in on how do I help a standard performing student step up, right? It's like being a coach, right? And you're trying to get your athletes to the next level. And so lots of teachers really appreciate different types of training and support for just that aspect. A lot of times, teaching is tough. And it's really hard to give up your tried and true favorite activities because like kids love them, them. It makes for a great setup on a tired day, right? But when everything else shifts in the process, I have to look at it and I either need to tweak it or I need to find something new. And that's a very time-consuming but well worth it process that's hard on us as teachers. So we need the time and space and creativity to figure out what that looks like. And sometimes we have experienced teachers that are like, I used to get tracked kids. And now I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. And so a lot of training, a lot of different resourcing. Time to put the honors course together, it took us 3 years, 6+ sub-out days a year, 2 weeks in the summer, and at least one of our prep periods every week for the last 3 years to really be able to put all the pieces together. And this is a messy year because it's the first year of implementation is always messy, right? And so we look at all those different things that were so beneficial to us. And so the funding, it required a lot of extra duty pay. It required a summer institute. It required stipends and it required sub-out days. So it's a huge investment for the district. But as we look at it, it's still on the front end, but as we start to look at these kids and how much more we have allowed them all to get to the top rung of the ladder, if you will, to go forward, or the bottom of the tree trunk, right? They can make any choice that they want to set themselves up, at least in the social studies realm, to change what's on their plate as they start to hone in on what works for them. And so it's been a really rewarding experience. And I think it's well worth the effort, but it is complex. It helps me know why we're all tired at the end of the day, right?
So again, I'd say what my hope of my takeaway, and I know we're almost right up against the end of our hour, but is the fact that, when I say we have over 300 individual courses in our district, now you know exactly what it means when I say that, because this is one. And this one has standards that are up for review in 4 years. So it is a never-ending job of a teacher, right, to try to stay current on their content, to stay current on whatever is happening legislatively, to stay current on new pedagogy and the skills and new strategies, because we didn't even get into instructional strategies in the classroom and what it takes to meet that. We didn't get into even the lesson plans. This is all the coursework that was done. Everything that they did was creating the curriculum framework for that course. Now our teachers go and have to actually write lessons to actually teach it to kids and to match instructional strategies to help our students be successful. So that is the work that we do. That is the work that we do every day. That's the work that this district started with Race to the Top, and teachers were having to do individually in silos in their classrooms by themselves. But through our process with Race to the Top, between all the work that we've done and the work that we continue to do, it's always our goal to try to help our teachers work smarter, not harder, because we have educators who are really, really working hard. But sometimes it doesn't end up with results because we're working hard at the wrong thing.
Trying to get my green light on. There we go. No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Does the board, anybody have any questions? Laurel?
See if I
And then Rich?
I'm not going to blow everybody away. Just a comment to make sure all the board members know too, I am so grateful for all the work that is done by our staff and the investment that we've made in this, because this gives our students the opportunities to have such a further educational experience. There are several districts, and I want to say it's close to 10, because honors and AP classes are not required or mandated. There are at least that many districts in the state that do not offer any honors, AP, or GATE programming for their students. And I think every student deserves that opportunity to be able to take the most rigorous classes that they're able to prepare themselves for the future. So I'm grateful for all the work and the investment that our teachers and staff have done to give this opportunity to our students.
Thanks. Richard, did you have something?
I'd just like to say a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. A lot of work went into this, and I just got one quick question. When the teachers have to unpack all this and write a lesson plan, that's got to be really difficult, and do they have enough support and time to write a good lesson plan to make sure they're in conjunction with the standards and everything?
The easy answer to that is yes, no, and maybe. I get a lot through collaboration with teachers that want to collaborate. Once you kind of get rolling and you've got a common conversation that comes through the curricular process, it's tremendously rewarding because all hands on deck obviously makes it better. But for teachers that are working alone in a course, right, they're doing all that by themselves. And so that's really challenging. But I like I said, I think it's well worth it. But sometimes I've got to reach out to Allie and go, look, I know you don't teach this course, but I need a sounding board. And so sometimes when it's difficult to have a sounding board, or when we don't have scheduled time, time is hard, right? We're trying to fit a lot in for the good of all of our students. But I think that the other piece that I would point out is our goal is to design it beyond ourselves. Right? The standards will eventually change, but the root work that you do to develop that program and to line it all up better be here for a couple decades after I leave, right? And so I have to have that long vision to know, hey, it may still be bumpy right now as we're working things out, but what would it be like to have been a brand new teacher to walk in and go, here's this, and here's this, and here's this, and here's your team that's going to help you, here's your new resources, and voila, there's your students. But lesson planning is an everyday, all the time, continuous cycle. But I do think, when we all work together and we pool those resources, like we pooled all of our stuff in a giant shared drive and everybody can just jump in there and grab what fits their class dynamic, it really helps. But again, yeah, it's very time intensive. And so sometimes you're relying upon just the goodwill of teachers to give of the extra time needed to get it done. But teachers often put in the extra mile, even when the extra pay maybe doesn't feel as equitable for what you put in, because you get in the middle of it, it gets really messy, right? But then if you see it through and you come through it, I wouldn't go back.
Yeah, and I'll say, I too, this year, I've been sitting in as a student and observing in the honors world, and I make notes for what we can do next year, things to increase engagement or a different activity or however that works, because the teacher that I'm working with, he is so deep in it, just trying to get through this year. And so having just second eyes on it has been really rewarding for me and for him. He's actually told me it's helpful. So that's nice.
So we have to wrap this up, but Richard,
Yep.
do you have something quick?
No, I was just going to say that I'd like to thank the teachers that are doing the lesson planning. I know they do it on their own time most of the time. Weekends, 8, 10 o'clock at night, they're still working. So I think we ought to just recognize the hard work that they are doing. And I'd really just thank them for continuing to do it.
Yeah, I would ditto that. Did we have somebody else? Lupe, go ahead.
You're right, I have to push hard. Sorry. So, thank you for all that tremendous information you gave us. I mean, that was a lot, so I was trying to wrap my head around all this, but I wanted to ask, so for the students that are average and they're not that confident in their skills, are they encouraged to take these honors classes, or are they given those classes? How do the students enroll in those classes?
So we actually use several bits of data when we look at course placement, especially from students from elementary into middle and from middle into high school. We typically look at the students' grades from the past year and previous year, sometimes the last 2 years, as well as like their MAP scores or their SBAC scores if they're in middle school going into high school, and we look at teacher recommendations. So it's kind of a thing that we blew it wide open. When I came on board at Carson High, we got rid of entrance exams that we used to make kids take tests to get into an honors course. We got rid of all of that. Instead said, no, we want to really challenge our students to take the most rigorous classes they can, encourage them to do that without them drowning. So when I say that, it's like we might say to a student who's never taken an honors course before, take one, right? Take one, give it a try. What's your favorite subject? Or the same thing with AP. But we try to use data to support that. But instead of saying, here's a test you have to take, instead we look at the performance from the previous year or the previous 2 years and say, you've already performed at this. You might be a terrible test taker, but your teacher says you're amazing in the classroom and that you can do this. We're going to put you in there. You might not be great about completing your homework all the time, but your test scores say you're way up here. So we're constantly looking at where can we look at that data and put the kids in the most rigorous classes that they can take and handle.
Thank you for challenging the students.
Yeah, thank you very much. I apologize, but we are running a little long. So I would recommend if any board members have any more questions, I know I have a few. We know who to reach out to, but please do so because this is interesting and important. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to close the board workshop and call to order the board meeting. So I apologize, it's a few minutes after 7. I would ask the
This
board.
meeting is being recorded.
Yes. Okay. So you take over. Yeah, so why don't we do that then? We'll just take a couple-minute break while we get ready for the meeting. And don't go far so we can get started as quick as we can. apologize for the delay. We had to load a presentation, and we are back in the Sierra Room, which is now the Bob Kroll Room, and we're still getting used to things here, so we apologize, but bear with us. So we're going to call the regular board meeting to order. It's 7:10, and we'll start with item 3, adoption of the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by trustee Crossman, a second by trustee Walker. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none by the board. Any discussion by those in attendance? Not seeing any. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is adopted as is. Item 4, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Good evening. I have a few things for your information. First off, it's no secret that there is a large snowstorm that has been forecast for our area. And so I have consulted with staff and with those weather experts and made the decision to cancel school tomorrow based on that information. So as a result, there will be no instruction tomorrow, including remote student programs. It should be noted that the state does not recognize digital days as a school day in session. And so what that means is that it's very likely, even though we've become very adept at providing digital information for our students, we're not able to use snow days in that same fashion. And so it is possible, depending on how many snow days are actually used this year, that we could have to make up days at the end of this year. So we'll keep you up to date on those, but for tomorrow, there will be no school in session in the Carson City School District. And we encourage families and staff to watch electronic mechanisms for gaining information. Certainly watch the TV and staff email, because this storm is forecast to last 2 days. And just be aware if there are any changes in the weather where we may have to take those changes into consideration for future snow days. But for right now, we're only looking at Wednesday, January 27th as a snow day. Next item, I'd like to just give you a brief report regarding our students who have returned to school 4 days a week. Those are students in grades 3 through 6. So effectively, we have students in our schools now, pre-K through 6th grade, that are in school 4 days a week. And I've received very favorable reports from our school principals and staff. They describe their classrooms as being lively and full of collaboration, and that is really a desirable thing. And I know that the students are gaining more by being in school more often in front of their teachers. The schools are working out some of the individual social distancing considerations. And just an example, in one of our schools, the cafeteria was the meeting place for students prior to the start of the school day. And as that room began to be filled to capacity, there was a need then to open another part of the school in order to maintain the appropriate social distancing. So those are the kinds of issues that our staff members and our administrators are working out. Nothing that is not doable, but certainly those kinds of things that are helping to keep our students and our staff members safe. Transportation is actually working quite well. There are a few little trouble spots. Fremont Elementary has 3 buses that serves the attendance area. And in some cases, when we have more students than the buses can actually hold officially, our staff members have stepped up. They are doing supervision of the students at the site, and then a bus that is full will start their route, and then once they have had enough students exit the bus, then they double back, go back to the school and pick up the remaining students. So it really hasn't been a hardship, and I just want to say thanks to all of our staff members who are just thinking, working hard, going beyond the initial expectation and really making this work. And it's really paying off to the betterment of our students and their situation. We're all looking forward to approximately February the 11th. I'm not sure of the exact date, but February the 11th represents the governor's next 30-day pause end. And so we're hoping that we continue to see fewer new cases of COVID. We continue to see reductions of new cases that are needing to go to the hospital. And all of those things, ultimately, we hope will result in restrictions being lifted. And then the last thing that I wanted to just remind trustees of is that tomorrow, the Planning Commission meeting will be held where our staff members will be presenting the Eagle Valley Middle School special use permit, and will be well represented with regard to that particular meeting. Just as a note, this is really the first time that the school district has ever been asked to contribute our school bond money to help build roads as part of a capital project. Now, these numbers and expectations have changed a little bit since I last spoke with you. However, it is important to note that we're well represented, and we appreciate our relationship with the city. We certainly want to be good community members, but this is something that's a little different. And we want you to be aware that some of those dollars could actually go to building roads versus building schools. But we do need the project at Eagle Valley Middle School in order for us to provide the outcomes and the goals that we have in mind as it applies to our middle schools in town. And so we're also resigned to the expectation that we need to keep moving forward with this particular project. So with that, I'll end my report, but happy to answer questions if any trustees have them for me.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Superintendent Stokes? Okay, seeing none for now, we're going to move on to item 5, board reports. And we'll start off with Sarah Wiggins with Carson High School, and then we'll move on to the board.
Hi there. So at Carson High School, we are planning our Winterfest, and this is going to be next week. And then similar to our homecoming, we aren't going to have a dance, sadly. And for the theme for this Winterfest, we are going to have it be Destination Unknown, where each grade level is going to kind of be its own destination spot. So seniors are going to be the UK, juniors are Hawaii, sophomores are Asia, and then the freshmen are Mexico. And then for this, we have 2 dress-up days for each cohort. So Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be a tacky tourist dress-up day. And then Thursday and Friday are going to be a staycation where you'll wear like pajamas, even though we're not allowing slippers, blankets, or pillows. And then Monday, we are going to have the assembly take place as the homeroom. And then the after-school activities. So Wednesday is going to be a virtual talent show, and that link will go up on Google Classrooms. And then similar to that, the Friday night crowning will be on that as well, starting at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad to see these events going on. I know it's hard, with the way school's going these days, but it's nice. Anything we can do to keep the students engaged and hopefully motivated is important. You don't need to get into it in any depth, but how are you coping with COVID and the change in education? Kind of curious the students' perspective.
It was a lot. It took me a month or 2 to definitely get into things, especially with the hybrid program. It definitely took a lot with my classes because this past year I had to actually switch out of an AP class because it was a lot. So now I'm in 3 AP and 2 honors, and it was just a lot to handle, but I'm doing great now. Thanks for asking.
Good. I'm happy. Good for you. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the board now. Way down there, about a half a mile from me, is Stacy. It is far.
Woo. I know we're gonna have to get cards to let you know we're talking. Not much. I'm sure everybody heard about the NIAA because of the governor's directive. We're probably not going to have basketball or wrestling this year. Hopefully by February we'll know about the winter sports, which would be football and the other ones. So we're hoping that'll come to fruition. I had my first call to the presidents of the PAC region, and so I'm chairman-elect, or chairman this year, so I'm trying to get used to that, dealing with 8 other states and hearing what's going on with them. But it was a good conversation. California's coming back into the national scene, so we'll have them back in the PAC region, which we're real excited about. And they're going to have the national conference virtual, which will be in April. There's information coming out on that, but we're pretty excited. And our one of our board of directors, Christy Sweet from Utah, has been nominated to take the chair at Secretary Treasurer of the National Board, which is a great honor considering as small a state as Utah is and small as our PAC region is. So we're pretty excited about that. So we'll be getting a new board of director, and we're having interviews on Friday. So that's all for me.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
If I could get the button to work. Mark Twain is currently in the middle of their access testing for their ESL students, and they are getting ready to embark on a Have a Heart for Our Community fundraiser, which will be geared towards providing personal face masks for all frontline workers at the Carson City Hospital. So this will be a contest between their different grade levels, and they're planning to start that on February 1st and ending on February 12th. So sounds like a great project. That concludes my report.
Great, thanks, Mike. Don?
A couple quick notes from Dr. Conley at Eagle Valley Middle School. He says his 6th grade return has gone very smoothly. It's good to see and work with all our 6th graders again. Our staff has done a phenomenal job of remaining flexible and getting these kids back into the norm. He also notes that the volleyball girls are having fun and at least get to work as a team this year. Also, one note regarding Winterfest and a Blue Thunder Marching Band note. They will be playing February 4th and February 5th, the different cohorts at lunchtime during the pep rally, I believe, that they're going to have. And that is my report.
Great, thanks, Don. Lupe?
All right, from Empire Elementary School, Mrs. Squires reported that they're very excited to have all the students back in the seat, and the students are very happy to be there. They are piloting the COVID watches and beta testing their effectiveness. This is an exciting an exciting STEM adventure for the school, so congratulations to them on that. For Siliger Elementary, their third through fifth graders are back, and they are also very excited to have them. And then they said that even though it felt like the first day of school, everything ran smoothly in the luncheon and classrooms. And they're also beginning to do the access testing that will be starting next week. That concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Lupe. Laurel?
Okay, for Fritch Elementary School, they report that bringing back the 3rd through 5th graders has gone well the last week. And also they have a COVID reflections contest that ends tomorrow. And so they're excited to see the creative projects that the Fritch students have done, and the winners will be announced on Friday. For Fremont Elementary School, they too are very happy to have the joyous sounds of a full school. And they would like to thank the parents for helping out with the busing overflow. Also, they are excited to offer an after-school program for EL students struggling with attendance issues in the first semester, and students struggling to regain their proficiency. So their after-school program will be starting up. And they had access for their EL students 1st through 5th, and they had 97% attendance. And they did that on Mondays to eliminate missed instruction time. And they're grateful for their parent support that was able to make that successful. For the Nevada Association of School Boards, you probably saw the email from Renee regarding the training that's coming up the end of March. So please reply and let her know if you plan to attend that training. At this point, it is still planning to go forward in person with the training, and there will be, of course, COVID protocols in place. And the rooms are large enough to have social distancing, and there'll be smaller rooms that way. And then just a comment, I know this is going back to Mr. Stokes' report on the Planning Commission, but as a trustee, I'm concerned about the city requesting the school district to pay a portion of a school road. And I'm concerned about what precedent that might set for future projects. This was a school that was in existence before many of those homes were approved by the city. And I feel our responsibility as school board members with the funds that we oversee for bonds are to be directed safely and solely to the students. So I'm concerned about that. Are we able to attend as board members that planning commission, Mr. Stokes? Or are there capacity limitations on that?
There are capacity limitations. Most of my staff will be attending via Zoom, but like this meeting, there's a way for all interested parties to be connected with the meeting, and by providing a telephone number, you can actually speak. So if you have interest in that, give me an email, shout out tomorrow, and I can help make that work.
Okay, thank you.
We can also put public comment in as individuals, not as, as representing the board, but you can put in public comment, and you can go to carsoncity.org and you can see how to do that.
Yeah, I think if we have any comments, let's coordinate with Richard after the meeting so we can kind of stay focused on the board reports. But that was a good comment. Richard Varner.
Yeah, I finally got this thing to turn on. At Bordwick Bray, they're having their access testing for grades K through 5 starting next week, Tuesday, February 2nd. And they also had a smooth transition or start with the students coming back to grades 3 through 5. It was a great week, they said, and that was filled with a lot of excitement for the students and staff. They were going to have a stream night tomorrow evening. It was going to be virtual, but I would suppose that's being put on hold now, and the families will be contacted to let them know when the next stream meeting will take place. At Carson Middle School, they state that most of the students have returned back in seat, the sixth graders, and that things are going really well. The classrooms are more lively, as you stated earlier, and a lot more discussions going on in their classrooms. And they're still having their S Club program for students with excellent grades, behavior, and attendance. And what this does is it allows the students to apply for and receive what they call an S badge, and that allows the students to have a few extra privileges for their good grades and attendance and behavior. And they're also looking forward for some kind of reward program to reward the remote students. And they've also started, they extended the school day by 10 minutes, and all the students are going back in their encore classes. And this is really a chance to help them, the students, get more organized by working with their encore instructor to fill out their notebooks and just to get more organized. And right now, that seems to be working fairly well. Volleyball, they said, is back underway. The students, athletes are really enjoying the game and the chance to meet other athletes and be around other athletes. So that seems to be going real well. The games you can't attend, but you can go to the YouTube channel and view the games. And that's in my report.
Great, thank you, Richard. For me, I was going to give a report on Pioneer High School, some student leadership announcements. Pioneer High School has welcomed back all students for 4-day-a-week in seat. Because of their smaller numbers, they're able to have all of their currently enrolled students on campus and still maintain the required 6-foot physical distances in all classes. Environmental science students began their storm drain cleaning project at Pioneer High School last week. Student Gustavo Gamiz? Gustavo, if I pronounce your last name wrong, I apologize. With a name like Cassiopo, I try not to mess it up, but here we go. Gustavo said he was happy to actually do some interactive projects to help the school and the community after spending the first semester learning about the issue of water pollution and discussing potential solutions. Pioneer Senior Spotlight this month highlights David Kimball. You can find the article on their Facebook page or on Carson Now. And then leadership students are planning a sweet surprise for local seniors by sending handmade Valentine's cards to remind them that they are loved. So thanks everybody at Pioneer High School. I appreciate the involvement, and that concludes my report. Let's see, with that, do we have any other announcements that we missed? Seeing none, we're going to move on to association reports. I don't see anybody in the audience. Renee, do we have anybody?
No, Mr. President, no association reports.
Okay. No association reports. Next is public comment. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but public comment is meant for anything that's not agendized. And we just ask that if you're here, we try to, depending on the amount of comment, keep it to about 3 minutes per comment. But with that, do we have anybody here for public comment? Seeing none. Renee, do we have anybody on?
Yes, I received an email earlier today.
Okay. If you don't mind, would you read it?
Sure. This comment is from Stacy Jones. She's the friend of a parent who has a 9th grader who plays basketball at Carson High School. It is sad that the kids' season was canceled. Yes, but it is ridiculous that the day I read about the final announcement coming down from NIAA Sports. Mr. Glover recognized a 7-team full-court scrimmage in the Carson High School gym for kids. All 3 levels played with and against each other. This completely was done with disregard of directives and mandates regarding practicing. On Friday, one player was COVID-19 positive, and now my friend's son is doing, along with all the other kids, a quarantine because of the selfish actions of a coach who thinks the rules don't apply to him. How is this okay with the school and the district as well as the school board? Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Any additional public comment?
That's all I have now, Mr. Casiopo.
Okay.
Scott, you are unmuted. Please state your name for the record.
Oh, hi, everybody. Scott Morrison from Western Nevada College, and I just want to say hi to everybody and thank you for soldiering on through all kinds of different difficulties. I saw that there's a Jumpstart and other kind of related report item coming up on the agenda, and so I'm here to add any color to that if I can when that item comes up. If it's appropriate, I'm happy to do that, sharing any data from the college and also my personal experience teaching Jumpstart students from Carson High over the past 4 semesters. So I'm happy to say that Jumpstart students from Carson High are as strong as ever. I have many in Calculus 2 now, and they're some of the best students I've ever seen. So here to support and help and add to the conversation if I can, and thanks for all you do.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Any additional public comment?
Seeing no further public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, recognition of nationally board certified teachers, Patricia Abayo and Rhonda Holloway. This item's for discussion only, and we have Tasha Fuson and Jenny Chandler.
I can't deny. Jennifer Chandler, for the record. This is one of my very favorite things to do. This year has been an amazingly challenging year, but it's always fun to have a wonderful celebration and to celebrate what has been accomplished. And National Board Certification is a professional certification, just like a lawyer would have to pass the bar and doctors would have to pass the medical examinations and so on and so forth. So it is a rigorous assessment process designed by teachers for teachers to help us maintain excellence in the profession. And so it's super rigorous in whatever we used to call a regular year. And the two ladies tonight blow me out of the water. They are my heroes because they did this during quarantine with kids online. Because we're a district that had already given our kids computers and we'd already gone through all the tech stuff and we offer so much rigorous professional development that these two ladies tonight have done what I would call almost the impossible. And they were undaunted throughout the whole process. And so this evening, Christina Bourne, who certified last year, and Rachel Croft, who has been with us for several years and she renewed last year, are joining me online. And Patricia and Rhonda are with us so that we can acknowledge them this evening. And so I'm going to pass it over to Christina Bourne, and she's going to share with you a little bit more about National Board.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Like she said, I'm Christina Bourne. I teach at Mark Twain Elementary School. I teach music, and I certified in music education last year. So our National Board portfolio component. So as we go through in our process of certifying, we have 4 different components where we are scored and that we are providing evidence of our accomplished teaching. So in component 1, it's content knowledge. This is a computer-based assessment requiring the demonstration of knowledge and of pedagogical practices for teaching in the teacher's entire content area. This is taken in a secure environment at a testing site and is specific to each individual teacher's certification. For component 2, it's all about differentiation and instruction. So this entry focuses on student learning and the teacher's ability to differentiate as evidenced by student work samples. And depending on who is certifying at that time, they will have different things that they have to submit for work samples. Component 3, you have teaching practice and learning environment, and this entry focuses on student learning and engagement and discussion as evidenced through video recordings of interactions between the teacher and their students. This component gets a lot of teachers a little bit nervous right now because of the fact that so many things are online, in person. So like Jenny said, these 2 women that certified last year in this quarantine are heroes, managing to do this in the midst of a quarantine. And then, of course, we have component 4, which is the effective and reflective practitioner. This entry focuses on evidence of teachers' impact across their professional responsibilities as an educator with students, peers, and community, and their ability to develop personal and student learning plans based on multiple points of data. So as you can see, it's a quite process, and it's a whole lot of work, but it's very, very rewarding and wonderful for students. So I'm going to pass this on to Rachel.
Good evening. This is Rachel Croft, for the record, and I teach 4th grade at Bordewick. And I am National Board Certified Teacher, and I did decide, I guess, I renewed last year, so I'm going to keep on with it. I also lead 2 groups of teachers, groups of teachers who are trying to complete their certification for the first time, and we also have a group in Carson who are working on their renewals. So we have had National Board around for long enough that we have teachers who are ready to renew again. So that's really exciting. This slide is showing you the big picture of National Board standards. Each standard has a multi-page document with really specific standards that go with each content area. But overall, the overarching pieces really show you that National Board distinguishes you as a teacher who is accomplished, is that teachers are committed to their students and their learning. Second, you know your content area and you know how to teach your content area to students. You're responsible for managing and monitoring students' learning. You think systematically about teaching, and you also are reflective on your practice and you learn from your experience. And then finally, we work together as members of learning community. So this green picture, that's the document that basically National Board is founded upon. Turn it over to Christina again.
Okay, so what we're looking at right now, this is our Architecture of Accomplished Teaching. And this is based on the Plan, Do, Study Act, the AAT, it's a systematic approach. So basically what happens is you have these 5 core propositions that you're implementing throughout your planning and your instruction. And it starts with you getting to know your students, setting rigorous and worthy goals, planning for their success, and assessing where they are in the learning process, and then setting new goals. So who are they, where are they now, what do they need, and what order do they need it? And that just continues as they grow and they learn.
So this is Rachel Croft again, and I'm so excited to get to introduce Patricia and Rhonda. We're going to let them speak kind of briefly and introduce themselves to you. I'm so excited to get to celebrate these ladies and their amazing accomplishment. Patricia, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Good evening. This is Patricia Ababio, and I teach graphic design at Carson High School. It's my 8th year teaching here. This process has been really amazing. It really helped me to thoroughly examine the unique ways that I can impact student learning and achievement, one of which I discovered that I could really play upon was partnerships within our community. I could provide quality graphic design products, still while ensuring rigor in the curriculum for the students. So I really focused my national boards on creating those partnerships and fostering those and helping the students to be prepared to work with community members.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I just love hearing about that, and I think that's really amazing. Okay, Rhonda, your turn. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Holloway. I teach English at Carson Middle School at 6th grade level, and this is my 13th year in the district. I'm certified in English in the early adolescent section, which covers the 11 to 14-year-olds. And I was so excited to be able to achieve this. This is something that's been on my to-do list for several years, but the timing just wasn't quite right. And I felt like if you were doing this, you had to start in the fall. And several of you know I coach, and I just didn't ever feel like the timing was quite right to take on one more thing in the fall at the beginning of the school year. And so I was just really excited to, on a whim, learn I could start in the middle of the year, and just have to give a shout out to Jenny Chandler for all of her encouragement, and also to Joanna Kaiser, another National Board Certified teacher, because without her, she filmed my last video on the last day of in-person instruction. I'm just not quite sure the results would have been the same. So I'm just so excited and just really grateful for the collaboration and the support from other board members in our district.
This is Christina Bourne again. So I just wanted to let you know that this is a list of all of the amazing National Board Certified educators we have here in Carson City School District. We are 17 strong and counting. We have a number of people who are currently working on their boards, and we look forward to welcoming them to this group. So in this group, we have Lacey Carey from Fritch Elementary School, Jennifer Chandler from Carson High School, Rachel Croft from Bordeaux Elementary, Debbie Crozier from Mark Twain Elementary, Jessica Daniels with Carson Montessori, Luann Giroux from Fremont Elementary School, Leah Hampton from Carson High School, Molly Martin from Mark Twain Elementary School, Christina Bourne, Mark Twain Elementary School, Jeffrey Hendricks from Student Support Services, Amy Jensen, Bordeaux Elementary School, Nicholas Jocks at Carson Middle School. He's actually Carson High School now. Joanna Kaiser is our Gate Implementation Specialist, Nicole Medeiros at Bordeaux Elementary, and Pamela Shank at Fremont Elementary. So we look forward to adding some more people to this list.
This is Rachel Croft again, and I want to say that I've been really thankful for Northwestern RPDP and the Nevada State Association or Education Association, because both of those entities have just really felt like no teacher should have to try to complete this extremely rigorous process alone. And so they've partnered together to create programs that teachers can join cohorts and work together as a group to help be part of the National Board Certification Program. So I'm just really thankful for these programs that agree that we want to elevate our profession and provide support for teachers who wish to become National Board Certified.
So I guess I would have one short thing to say, and then I want you to have a chance to talk to Rhonda and Patricia. But what is so interesting to me in the process is that teachers that I teach with in district and see at different times, when you're helping them and observing what they do in boards, it's like looking inside of their minds. And these ladies are just incredible. Like Patricia teaches around the corner from me, and we're so busy with kids, we never get to really interact. For teachers that are interested in the process, it used to be very regimented and you had to start in the fall if you wanted to work through. And now it's on a rotating cycle to accommodate coaches and family situations that you're like, fall is not a good time for me to start. So if you're interested, reach out to anybody on this list, but particularly Christina, Rachel, and myself are what is called candidate support providers. And so we're there to support people completely through the process. So we thank you for a chance to talk to you about this. And actually, it might have a treat for you next month because of the delay in deadlines and scoring. We might have more to show to you next month. So you might see us again. So at this time, I would like to give you an opportunity to talk to our newly certified teachers.
Good, thank you very much. I guess I'll start off. Patricia and Rhonda, obviously, congratulations. I think it is quite an honor, not just to say that you're nationally board certified, but just the process to get there. You know, it takes, it's really a tribute to your character and your hard work. And for any of us who hold licenses in our various professions, it's a lot of effort. And so I just want to congratulate the both of you. And thank you for all that you do. I know a lot of things teachers do. And before the meeting started at 7, we were talking about what goes into curriculum planning and adoption and all that. And there's so much behind the scene effort that goes on to educate our students that, you know, hats off to all teachers, because like all of you say, you don't do it for the pay. And that makes you even so much more special, because it is a tremendous amount of work. And so I know Rhonda is a coach along with a teacher. Patricia's a busy person. And so congratulations to the both of you, and thank you for everything you do. As far as the rest of the board, does anybody have anything they'd like to add? Rich?
Yes, Patricia and Rhonda, congratulations. And I just wish you were here in person so we could give you a big round of applause, and maybe we could still do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on then to item 9. Discussion and possible action on the following reviewed CCSD policy for which no changes are proposed. This is policy 817, identification badge, and this is for possible action. And we have Ann here with us.
Good evening, President Cacioppo, trustees, staff, and members of the public. I am pleased to review this policy with you this evening, Regulation 817 regarding identification badges. This regulation was last reviewed in 2010. And it was brought up for review as we were looking at the regulation concerning key protocols as we are adopting the card key badges. So nothing really changing in terms of the purpose of the regulation, paragraph on process for issuance of the badges,
That's all right.
Yes.
Buttons. Okay, there we go. Just for clarification, aren't we on agenda item 9, which is policy 817, not regulation yet?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yes, so.
Yeah,
the
we
pol-
are. So we
yes,
jumped
the-
ahead
the
to the
poli-
regulation, so let's do the policy.
I'm sorry, yes, the
My fault.
policy along with the regulation were last reviewed in 2010, and there were no changes recommended to the policy.
Sorry, is it an agenda item on agenda 9? for
Yes,
possible action?
so item 9, which is the policy, that's for action.
Just simply having reviewed it.
And I think, does everybody have that in their packet? I want to make sure, okay.
I'll make a motion.
Don, go ahead.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve January 26, 2021 as the review date for policy 817, identification badge.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Laurel Crossman. Do we have any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? In person? Any online, remote comments?
Seeing no public comment online?
No public comment, Mr. Cassiopo.
All right, thank you. Then we have a motion and a second. I'll call the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thanks, Ann. Moving on to item 10, and this is the regulation. Discussion on proposed changes to CCSD Regulation 817, identification badge, and this one is for discussion only.
Thank you very much. And such an exciting regulation it is. So, moving right along.
I was looking forward to it all night.
Right? Okay. So this is for discussion only, and the regulation essentially addresses a process for issuance of badges, some language pertaining to the importance of wearing and displaying a badge, a process for updating badges every 5 years, replacement of the badges, and when visitors substitute employees and volunteers, they will be given temporary badges. Questions?
Yes,
Yeah,
just a
Laura,
couple.
go ahead.
Just a first comment on the first sentence, issued identifications badges. I'm thinking it should be just identification badge. And then, is there a difference between an identification badge and an identification card? Because in the new language, it's referred to frequently as an ID card. And I just think that if we're talking about identification badges, we should be consistent with the language throughout.
Okay. Yeah, same thing? Okay.
So, and I think when we get
Yep,
to
Lupe, you'll be next, I'm sorry.
discussion of the other regulation, the definition of the card key is an identification badge.
Go ahead.
So there is a difference then between or is the key card the same piece of plastic as the ID badge?
It can be.
Okay.
Not all identification badges will function as a key card.
Okay. I just think we should be consistent
Yeah.
in how we're calling.
So if we can just go through that,
Yeah.
just checking for consistency.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lupe?
So on page number 1, in the section where it says receipt of new card, upon initial employment, Human Resources shall issue new staff members a district issue identification card, and then it says for some employees, this card shall function as a key to allow access into the buildings. Is there is it possible to be more specific as to who those employees will have access to this card? It just says for some employees. To me, it sounds like it's pretty vague.
So Eventually, all employees, their identification badges will function as key card access. It's just that we have implemented that project in a phased manner. So right now we have 6 locations. So those employees will have identification badges that function as key cards, while other schools will be phased in.
So it's not the administrators, it's just,
Correct.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Right, any additional questions by the board? Seeing none, anything else, Ann, from you?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to item 11, discussion on proposed change to CCSD Regulation 706.1 Key Protocol. This one is for discussion only, and again, Ann's here.
More excitement.
Don't
So,
undersell it.
yeah, the key protocol was reviewed, and there really weren't any changes necessary to the key protocol, only to introduce a new defined term, that being the card key. And so on page 2, you'll see in italicized lettering the definition of a card key, which is an identification badge that provides access to buildings and restricted areas. As far as how that identification badge will be treated in terms of key protocols, it will be treated exactly as we treat a key.
I just had one question. It's not recommending a change, but under the definitions, we have skilled building maintenance worker, and it says the only maintenance staff personnel authorized to make keys, et cetera. When I first read it, I was thinking in my head, there's probably a number of skilled building maintenance workers, but they're not all going to possess keys. Is that, I guess my question was just for future reference, is that the best title? Is that an appropriate title for that, or is it too vague given that we might have other specialties?
You know, I will review that with Mr. Kornick, because I know at this time we only have one person who's authorized to make keys. Other persons who might access the archive system or assign or perform repairs to the keying system would be from the building maintenance department, and they have a process for doing that.
Okay.
But I'll review that with him.
No, thank you.
And
Any-
Mr. President, with your
sir.
permission, the title skilled maintenance or building maintenance personnel, I mean, that's an actual title that's in our contract.
And I didn't mean to say it wasn't. My thought was I didn't know if people who were responsible for the keys had a certain title that was different than somebody that might possess a different type of skill. I'm fine with it. I was just asking the question.
Okay.
Any other board questions? All righty. Thank you very much, Ann.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 12, presentation of the 2019-2020 ACT test scores and other college readiness indicators for Carson High School and Pioneer High School. This is for discussion only, and we have Principal Bob Chambers and Principal Jason Zona. Yeah, I don't think it turned on. There we
All right,
go.
there we go. All right, good evening. Thank you for having me here today. As we go along, feel free to absolutely stop, ask questions. I'm not guaranteeing you answers, but I can definitely write them down and make sure you get all the answers as well. All right? Cool. All right. So for our first slide is for your graduation rate. Obviously on an upward trend since 2017, keeping in mind that they did change the school formula so that kind of that 2017 number represents one of the first years when they kind of reworked the formula and our graduation rate took a dip, and then we adjusted, and we've been trending upwards. 2019 to 2020, about 1% lower, right? I think the number that you'd be interested in out of the whole thing would be the 34 non-grads within Carson High School. That's where I tried to predict questions that would come of that. So it's actually a really complicated question that I can't wrap up into a nice, neat little package like I would like to. So within that number, you have students who would be fifth year seniors. You have students that we could not find. So an example of that would be if you had a ninth grader come in first semester of their ninth grade year. So they would not have a high school transcript at all. And maybe they came in, sat in seat for a week, never received credit, and then they moved out of state. If that school never called our school and asked for a transcript, then they would actually, and if we can't track them down and figure out where they went, they actually count as a non-grad for the high school. So that's not a lot. Just kind of looking at the numbers, there's three ninth graders that were quoted, as ninth graders that couldn't find. Some severe and profound students who don't graduate with a regular diploma, go to school until they're 22. I would be in that number as well. And then a lot of withdraw codes. So the withdraw codes, there's many different reasons why students would withdraw, but at the end of the day, they were basically non-grads for Carson High School. All right, so with that, I was just going to pause and see if you had questions on the Carson High School's graduation rate, non-grads. Transfer out, those are students who started in a cohort and then obviously they went to a different school. We know where they went, they don't count against us. They just transferred, went somewhere else as a normal transfer student.
Any questions, Laurel?
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many of those 34 became non-grads after March 12th of last year when everything was shut down?
So if I understand your question, how many of those students just disappeared? I do not know that number. So they would be seniors, what you're asking, seniors at Carson High School who would have been on track to graduate and then did not graduate. Okay.
When the shutdown occurred.
Yep. No, I'm just because that's a pretty specific question, so I get that answer. Okay.
Any other questions? No? Keep going.
All right. I challenged Trustee Walker to make me sweat. And so, absolutely ask me the questions. The only way that I'm obviously a first-year principal, the only way that I can get better at doing what I do is so that I can understand from your community standpoint, what expectations are as well. So ACT, that's flat. That's flat growth. Absolutely. I mean, the exact same composite score. Let me get to the right page. So the good news is we're maintaining the work that we did over the past 5 years. So we're not experiencing a dip in the numbers. The bad news is we're not experiencing growth, expectation that, yes, we outdo the state, but we should be on pace with what the nation does for census testing schools, and we are not on pace for what the nation does for census testing schools. I gave you the benchmark scores there, so that would be those benchmark scores just represents the student's likelihood to experience success when they go to post-secondary education to college. The structures that we have in place that help maintain everything that we have done, and I know that for the board members, you're aware of these. We do our ACT boot camp, and what I want you to know, I recognize that these things that we do are very prescriptive and in the moment for 11th grade students. They're not systemic, okay? So, and the second part of that is we need to actually achieve growth, we have to have some systemic changes. But what we do to maintain where we are, we have the ACT boot camp. We host that ourselves. It's open and live for all students to come to in English, math, and science. Exposure starting in 10th grade to ACT style questions, English, math, science, etc. Practice testing begins in 11th grade, where we start exposing all of the students to get used to taking ACT style tests, right? We provide an excellent testing environment. Having been the ACT guy for the high school, setting up those testing environments, it's super important to give the students the absolute best opportunity while they sit in that room to score their best score. Super small testing environments, keep it at 15 students in a room, 2 proctors. It's a really well-oiled machine, so like that's really important.
So Bob, one of the things we certainly want to see growth, but in these circumstances, to see a flat line as opposed to a dipping line, I think that's good news. And one of the things I was talking about with my teachers recently was just, I think what we're going to experience for years to come is that normal is going to drop for all of us at all grade levels, because the impact of what's happening in education right now, we can't even calculate it. And so I think that's a victory that you're maintaining, and I hope that you're able to keep that up, really.
Now, full disclosure, because of the way that I'm wired, that score was taken before shutdown. Okay? All right. So I'll talk to you guys next year. Well, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse on that. Anyway. So I hear you and I appreciate that. My student takes the ACT next year. So it's super important to me that we fill those gaps, that we maintain high standards, and that we recognize everything, all the hard work that is to come, because the hard work won't go away, right? This is happening across the nation, across the world. So,
Bob, we can talk about numbers, and I'm curious to see where next year's numbers are, and I'll ask questions. Like, I always like to see where we are in terms of the state, and then maybe on a national average where we are, because when we see things like, the ACT benchmark score, obviously we want to reach that. So those will be questions I'll be asking later is, COVID aside, if we start the fall semester and we're all back in school, what are anticipated growths, if any? But that aside, when we're getting these kids ready for the ACT test, I think a lot of times students, and I base this on my own kids and some of their friends, I don't think they always understand, at least historically, the importance of the ACT. You always think, well, I got to get a good ACT score so my chances to get into a school improves. And then what you find out when your kids go to college is it is important, but what it's also important for is financial aid. And I think a lot of times students miss that piece. They don't see the bigger picture. And do we do anything to help make them more well-rounded in the importance of these types of tests?
Yeah, we do an education piece on the importance of the ACT for our students. Yeah.
Okay. I just think that would be helpful for kids and parents. So I'm glad we're doing it.
Yeah. They're part of what we need to do, and we have changed the ACT culture within the school. The first year that the first years that we were census testing, we had a lot of reports from very disappointed teachers for all the work that goes in, and students were finishing tests in 5 minutes, right? Sure. So that has gone away less and less, and students, it still happens. I mean, we're testing everyone, that definitely still happens. However, that is no longer the norm or seen a lot or reported back anecdotally. So, I mean, part of that is just that, like you said, the education, the importance of it so that they can connect. My message to the students, and I do, like I talk directly to the student body via our news channel, is that they need to know their score. And the only way you know your score and what you could possibly do with your future is to actually take that test the first time seriously, right? So if you got it, maybe you're pretty decent at English in your junior year, basically a full semester before you're really supposed to take this test, you score an 18, like you might not have ever been thinking that college is an option. But now college, like that could creep into your brain. And I just want them to really take that seriously, that you can see your score and either know where you need to be, where you want to be, or that you're actually ready to go to college in some aspects of this. So, and then the second push of that is keep taking the test. ACT will accept, like a lot of colleges accept super scores, and there's a lot of different ways to receive money through that. And each time you take it, you plateau about your third time, right? But students should probably take the ACT 3 times if they're really looking at scholarships and getting into, elite colleges or just getting in, right? So all that's important. My son will take the ACT 3 times. He'll take it before. He'll take it before the February 1, and then the February 1, and then his first semester senior year, because that's the last chance that you get to take it. So that's really where I want students to start thinking of testing for college. Other questions? All right.
Any other questions?
How do we convey that information to the parents of, letting them know about these options that the students have and to take advantage of these options?
So across the board, we could do a better job messaging parents. This year, in previous years before me, I know we had parent nights and we did a lot of messaging out to parents and workshops and just this year that has not existed. It's something that to get the message out is not a difficult task. We have plenty of digital opportunities, and then when we're back in person, we have plenty of opportunities to bring parents in. I would say that this year, messaging from my office has not been there the way it could have been.
These are funny buttons. Okay, got it. Also this year, though, the ACT hasn't been offered as it usually is in the fall, correct?
Correct.
Because they're not holding it. So this year is going to be, when we have this report next year, you're not going to have kids who had the opportunity to take it in the fall before they took the state mandated one in February, just because the test wasn't offered. So, and I think colleges across the board are reevaluating how they're looking at ACT for admittance given this crazy year.
They are. All right, I'm hitting the button. All right. I think what stands out on this slide to me would be if you look kind of at our 3-year enrollment trend is declining, and that is concerning because all of this will tie directly back to how we're going to score on any standardized test, the ACT included. You always want to be pushing students to the maximum level of rigor across the board. So if your AP enrollment is declining, if your honors enrollment is declining, if your jumpstart enrollments are declining, that means students they're not reaching that level to be successful on tests like the ACT or be prepared for college and career. So that is a concern. It is on my radar. I already have meetings set to make sure that we're ready to rock and roll. And you heard Ms. Wiggins state that, she backed out of some AP classes. Like, we're going to go into a hybrid system, and the rigor level is super high. And so students may have had to decide, well, I'm going to start picking and choosing my AP classes. Maybe I'll take an honors class instead of AP. That all happened. But if you look at the trend, it was still going down, right? So I think that it's a little more on the, I have this this year's current. It's pretty blunt. Like we lost another 20 students this year, right? So that's, I mean, it's on the radar. Like we're definitely looking at that and already preparing how do we fill in gaps so that these students can be successful. Just recognize that it exists and that we want to actually make sure that we bolster those numbers. Those are my comments on that slide.
I don't think it's on yet.
Dang it. Okay. I'm still impressed because I know the AP testing in the spring of 2020 was a first for everything. I had kids I had 2 different kids taking AP tests at home, and we turned off every streaming device there was. It was like, you can't watch TV, you can't, anything, so that they didn't have a break in their access. And still Carson High School ends up with AP scores higher than the global average. So kudos to those AP teachers that are getting the kids ready for those tests.
students.
Even though the testing format completely changed last year, the kids still did very well.
Absolutely. It was a very amazing performance. And yes, that one did happen during COVID. That is absolutely a representation of what was going on at that point in time.
I know we have Scott Morrison. I don't know if Scott's still on the line, but I wondered if he had any thoughts from his, AP or Jumpstart perspective. Are you still with us, Scott?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks. Happy to answer any questions, but I have some data here and I could just run through it real quick and then see if there's anything else to add. And I know the high school and the school district track data very closely with this, and we have periodic meetings to go over our numbers and talk about trends too. So I want to say that from the outset, we find the school district and the high school in particular to be a really good partner in this, looking to build opportunities for students, which is what we all want to do. We have kind of 3 buckets of dual credit students from Carson High and from Pioneer in dual enrollment, where they sort of choose their path and may even take classes that as sophomores or even earlier. There's Fast Track, which tends to be just online. And then there's our Jumpstart program, which has been around for some years and folks are most familiar with. There were 91 Carson High School students enrolled in Jumpstart, either as first-year juniors, first-year seniors, or second-year seniors, and 4 from Pioneer High School, 37% male, 63% female students. So there was overall in dual enrollment, in Jumpstart, there's 331 class enrollments, I believe. So a good portion of students taking classes. Overall, the proportion of students who earned credit, college credit at the end of, and this is fall 2020 numbers, 91% earned credit in the classes that they were taking. And just under that, 87% met our success rate, which is C or better. Earning credit takes D or better, but C or better at 87% is a really, really strong number. Pioneer High School is right there also with 87%. So really good opportunities for students who want to engage at that level. And of course, the juniors who start in Jumpstart are on track to graduate with an associate's degree upon their high school graduation. Personally, I taught the Jumpstart cohort on the Carson High campus starting last fall, in fall 19, had 31 students in pre-calculus through that year. About 29 of them followed me into calculus this fall. And now I've got a mixture of students from Carson High and Dayton and other schools, as well as our general population who are just really kicking butt in their college classes and seem really confident in their ability to kind of navigate the college environment and handle the college level expectations. So I'm just continue to be very, very impressed and with all the support despite all of the difficulties over the past year. So happy to stop there and answer any questions.
Any questions related to that? Okay, seeing none right now. Back to Bob.
Thank you, Scott. We're actually meeting February 1st, so. The main point I think on this slide is enrollment is increasing, which is a good thing. However, if you compare it to the amount that AP is declining, it doesn't cover. Like I could be happy if Jumpstart was increasing and kind of covering what we were losing in AP, because you'd kind of think that those students are choosing different paths, right? But that doesn't cover. So it's still that a declining enrollment is a declining enrollment, and it is a concern. So
sure.
That was kind of my point on that. So on this slide, and since you don't have, and this is the first time that honors was introduced, I wanted honors on this just so you could kind of have an idea. This is current, what we have currently. There we go. So and that 266 is a pretty significant drop of about 20 students. So to put it in perspective on that honors, we had about a total of around 1,000 students. The second point of concern is when you look across the line at Hispanic students, that they represent over 45% of our population, but they're not equitably represented within that column either, and that is also something that is a concern. To kind of bring it back to ACT, anecdotally, if you were to think about the ACT score in math their junior year, if they're in honors algebra 2, they're much more likely to meet benchmark for ACT. So that's kind of the breakwater. If you're in regular algebra 2, which that's what I was in, you're not as likely to meet the benchmark of ACT. So it's just, we have to always consider the rigor level of our classes and making sure that we're preparing students at all levels so that they can be successful, so they can have the future that they want to have. So that is literally the only note I had on that slide. So if you guys have questions.
You know, and you guys have great counselors at the high school, and I think that's a huge relationship piece, because some of those kids might not reach out for advising. And so if there's nobody kind of ushering them towards that, if they're just kind of quiet and falling by the wayside, just doing what they do to get through school, you know, I think that sometimes it's just getting to know those kids, which is really hard with the size of your school. But I think that that's just kind of for all schools. I think that's really good practice, is get to know these kids and really kind of push them in the right direction.
I think that comment is like that, to push them to take an academic risk. I don't need students that are taking 5 to 7 AP classes. Where we can really see gains is by pushing students to take an honors class for the first time. Like, you know, you have a B in English 1, but you turned every single assignment in, you have the work ethic, right? You can try honors English 2. I think that's where we can make a lot of headway with our students, to give them that academic nudge in the proper direction, and that, you know, we believe in them. And sometimes they just have to have that teacher or counselor let them know that I see you and I see what you're doing, and you need to try this. So, and then also because they're difficult classes, you don't want to see a student, you know, that the supports are built in there so that they can be successful. Questions on that? We're getting real close to the end.
I just want to make a comment. I just basically want to echo what Trustee Walker commented on. These students, I feel they certainly just need that encouragement, because they are lacking confidence. They are doing well in their classes. They're just simply scared, you know. And so for them to be guided by the counselors or the teachers the right direction, they will challenge themselves, and they recognize that they are able to do the work. I can honestly tell you that I have a lot of students that are going into the Latino Leadership Academy at WNC, and they're stellar students. They're doing marvelous. And I see their transcript, their high school transcript, and I question them, why didn't you apply for Jumpstart? And their response is the same, I was scared. And then I would ask, did you mention this to your parents? Did your parents help you decide what to do? Parents did not know. And so that's why I think it's really important for the counselors or the teachers to advocate for them. And definitely include the parents in these conversations.
Absolutely.
And I think it's harder now, but I think to that, back when we were in regular session, we could have students come back to the high school and talk to the students. And I think getting that student-to-student input sometimes goes a long way because, they just did it. And if a kid's afraid, gee, I don't know if I can make it, and he hears from another kid who maybe he or she knew, they think, well, shoot, if they did it, maybe it's not that much of a reach for me. And so I think finding a way to get those, those recently graduated students or those students in Jumpstart to come and talk to the high school, either high school, I think really can help motivate some of these kids and say, hey, I think I can do it.
I agree. Just point of celebration, really awesome. So for our Millennium students who qualified for the Millennium Scholarship, a significant jump in 2020. Interesting point, qualifiers for the ACT not due to their GPA. So to qualify for your GPA, you need a 3.25 unweighted GPA, meet all the graduation requirements. Just to qualify for your ACT, you have to have a 21. So these students, it's a really interesting, didn't qualify through their GPA, but they did qualify on the test. That's a significant number. So we had 246 students qualify out of our senior class in 2020 for the Millennium Scholarship, which is awesome.
I think we're good.
All right. I'm going to hazard a guess you'll have a few questions on this slide. I took many more notes. All right. I guess this is this year, 2020, hybrid only. I do not have statistics from online, and because they're not done yet. They are actually, I think they just put finalized grades in yesterday for online. It takes a little bit longer because we're relying on a totally different company to grade stuff. So some generalities about online before I discuss this. Semester 1, we had 431 students. Semester 2, we have 250 students. So we brought back just under 200 students who were not successful in the online platform. We did allow some students who were not successful in the online platform to stay due to health reasons, but we did put a plan of action, an academic plan in place for them to support them so that they could experience success. The next number, if we just go straight to the bottom right-hand corner, we had about a 12.6% failure rate. So my anticipated question was, what did it look like first semester last year? Okay. 8%. Right? Then my next anticipated question was, what are we doing to fix that? Okay. All right. So we do credit recovery, and it's triaged out seniors first to make sure that all the seniors are able to get all the credits they need so that they can be successful in graduating. I also chatted with our counselors, a quick and dirty number on where our seniors are, because definitely eye on the prize, that senior graduation rate. We had 62 total seniors who failed either Econ Gov or their senior English class. Now, keep in mind that we could have doubles in there. I didn't have them differentiate out because you could have failed both and still appeared in that number. So that number is probably a little bit lower, right? So if we start, so those are that's red flag for a counselor. You have to have those credits to graduate, right? So you're instantly in credit recovery and making those credits up. So I don't have like super solid math on that, but 62 is a lot, right? Especially when you think of the number of 34 non-grads at that 93%, right? Right. So, so like things that we're doing to be successful second semester, obviously new online platform. We're done with Pearson for the most part. Meeting with my teachers, they're liking the platform. They feel much more connected to the students there. So that's going well. Bringing students back from the online platform to Carson High School. Major concern was the math portion of that. So if you didn't do anything for a semester in math, you cannot go into second semester algebra. You cannot go into second semester geometry. Right? It won't work. You're just going to fail. So we've actually enrolled those students, freshman and sophomore, Algebra 1, Geometry. They're doubled up. So they have 2 periods of math, so they're going to get a year's worth of math in a semester. If you follow me on that, they're doubled up in their schedule. That was a lot of shuffling of staff to make that happen, but I have an awesome math department who actually absolutely like raised their hand. I mean, they were the ones that were like, we can't just bring them back, Bob. We have to have a plan in place. So came up with a plan, made that happen.
I mean, that's a lot. When you think about you're already struggling in math and now you have 2 math classes.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the supports you guys put in place to help students with that? Because I'm just thinking it could be really overwhelming for a kid who's unsuccessful. I mean, we know it's important. And I think that it's one of the many things that are really frustrating for these kids in high school right now in these situation. So, I mean, I'm just trying to wonder, I mean, kind of as I rolled my eyes, I heard Tasha gasping. I mean, it's a lot. And so I just don't know, how do we support these kids and keep them moving forward and supported? And we don't want to feel like we're banging them over the head with a baseball bat. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for the math class specifically, it's for the most part designed where they'll have 2 different teachers on 2 different days. That's for the most part. There's exceptions to that rule. The other option would always be to be a semester behind in your math, or a forced summer school math for like 200 kids. Does that make sense? So neither one, and you need to understand that I'm making decisions daily that are not all that palatable. They're compromised decisions from
And I'm not
start.
questioning the decisions, because I would agree with that. That's exactly what I do also. I'm just wondering what supports in addition to the 2 classes. I mean, I'm just thinking that some of those kids are probably going to need a little something extra.
Off the top of my head, Trustee Walker, I do not have any a good answer to that question.
Well, I guess you got what you asked for when you were coming in the room.
Thank you, sir. No, it's absolutely a good question. And from a decision-making end, oftentimes you look at nuts and bolts and how to get across the finish line. And within that viewpoint, you sometimes forget that you are talking about quite a few students.
You know, one thing I'm noticing, just with the handful of kids I've spoken to at the high school, you know, and I know Richard's brought this up too, just, you know, the faster we can get these kids back into the schools from an academic standpoint, the better they're going to be. Because I've talked to a number of students, and I'm shocked at how little time they're spending on school during the week. And you know, I think some kids are spending a lot of time, but some kids are spending next to nothing. At least that's what they're telling me, and I know they're kids. And I don't know where their grades are, but some are indicating they're doing fairly well. And so I just think this accountability piece is a struggle when we're, you know, when we have hybrid versus, you know, kids that are fully remote and whatnot. And I don't know how easy or hard that is, but finding a way to engage these kids. I know we're limited in how many hours we can do that, but finding a way to engage them and make them accountable. You know, you can't, the first step in learning is to be present.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the struggles you have right now is how many of them are really present?
And I can only give you like my anecdotal answer to that was having 2 students, one in middle school, one in high school. I text my kids to make sure that they like hit the digital login button every day, and 50% of the time, like, oh, thanks, I forgot. I mean, it's a real struggle. But I can also say, both my kids work at home for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, which doesn't necessarily seem like a lot.
Yeah.
However, if you kind of suss out lunch and teacher talk, and if you're just doing work, that's, you know, it's a respectable amount of work. But there are days where it's easier, and then on those days, I tend to find that there are also about 5 missing assignments and fights at home and all sorts of stuff. So, from my perspective on the students that, and just so you know, I went to many classrooms across the board in the high school and discussed with students face to face, and I know and I always introduce myself. Do you know who I am? Oh, yes, you're the principal. Okay. How much work do you do at home per class? And the average answer was about 30 minutes from a student. Now, that's once again anecdotal, and some would say an hour, and some would say 2 hours. But those were kind of the outliers. Is like, per class, I spend about 30 minutes a class, and I did a lot of classrooms and spoke with a lot of students on that.
Okay.
Someday I'll figure out that button. I know in the beginning of hybrid, students couldn't come after school unless it was their cohort day. Are they now available to come any day if they need after-school help, even if it's?
Yes,
not?
we opened it up.
Okay.
Because we do have enough, busing hasn't been an issue, and the rush to school and having a bunch of people isn't an issue. So we would have to monitor it to make sure that we have enough staff to cover our after-school with the appropriate amount of space. But yes, we did open it up. And that will also go for all the ACT stuff. It'll be open to both cohorts. Whenever they can get here, they can get here.
I gotta figure out this button also. I have a question, just so I understand this chart that's in front of us. On the right side where it says the failings, you had 1,443. That's classes that are being failed, not students who are failing. Is that correct?
Correct. So
how many students are we talking about that are actually failing?
The reason that I went this route with courses taken, total courses taken, and courses failed is because students may fail one, and I can get you the total number of students who had an F. That's not a problem. The reason I didn't go with that number is because a student might fail 7 or 1, and it would read the same when that's kind of, you know, and not to make light of anything, but if you fail an elective, it might not have an impact on your graduation, right? If you fail Algebra 1, that has a definite impact on your graduation. So I was trying to give you a broad view of what failures look like within the school on something that I could compare it to last year, just so I was trying to give you a touch point from what it looked like last semester to this year, this semester.
I understand that better
Okay.
now. It doesn't mean that we have X amount of students who are failing completely, just
Correct.
X amount of students who are failing at least one or more classes.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I could definitely get you 1 or more. Like I can have that number. That's not a difficult number to get.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we can just move on. You got more, I guess? No?
That's it.
All right. No questions at all, right? Okay, well, thank you very much. It was a good
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Shared a lot of information, and we appreciate it.
And just so you guys know, I am taking this back to my staff I put way too much time on this to just present it one time, so it is in the next staff meeting. If there's anything that you would want to be noted to my staff, you can shoot me an email and I can let them know. I'm going to probably write down a bunch of notes just so I can kind of capture your ideas, because I do think that point is important, the back and forth from you guys to the staff, just to know. I just leave my mic on. It's
I know
easier.
but then I'll get all this feedback. They gave us these new
Okay.
buttons and I'm not very good at it. Or it's a bad button. Just a point that I think would be interesting to get feedback from the staff is, I know you mentioned how you're doing the kids taking double math classes, but what remediation and what recovery steps does your staff recommend? And what are things that, as session starts in a couple weeks, what needs are kids going to have next year when school resumes that we need to make sure the legislatures know there's not the funding to do some of the supports that kids are going to need to make up from this year? And that would be, I think, beneficial input.
I can absolutely ask that, for sure.
Okay.
Do you want me to put it, like, email it back out to all? Or, okay. Can do.
Hi all, Tasha Fuson for the record. I felt it was important for me to take a moment of time just to explain what we're doing on the curricular end. I don't want anyone to leave this presentation thinking that students are just being placed in 2 math classes and no consideration has been taken to what they're learning. So currently, as tied to our presentation, our board workshop before, that's what one of the tasks that our curriculum coordinators do. So Carolyn Cook is in charge of math. She's our curriculum coordinator. She's currently curriculum coordinator. She's currently working with our secondary teachers and their PLCs to modify the curriculum for those students. What I mean by that is we do know that many of these students have learned something in first semester. It doesn't mean that they haven't learned anything. They might not have been successful, but they have some skills coming in. So it's about identifying what skills they have and then working with those teachers to say, you know, if Mr. Chambers and I are both teaching math and he has them on B day for the second semester and I have them on A day for the first semester, he's not going to plow into second semester curriculum realizing that they don't have the learning progressions or those learning skills from first semester. So that's why Mr. Chambers has had those teachers paired together so that they can actually sequence the material that students are learning over the course of the second semester. So in essence, those 2 teachers will basically be teaching first semester algebra, for instance, for like the 3rd quarter. And then together they'll be teaching second semester algebra in the 4th quarter. And what we've done is taken and really identified power standards, or we're working with teachers to identify the power standards. So what are the essential learning for each of those courses that the kids need to know to be successful? There is some curriculum or some standards within the curriculum that can be removed that are not essential learning targets for the student to be successful in geometry the next year, or for geometry to be successful in algebra 2. So that is work that is going on currently on Mondays when our students are doing those digital days and our teachers are working together in those PLC sessions. That's what's going on to modify the curriculum in those math courses that the students will be taking.
And no, that's fine. And just to be super clear on that, because it might have been a little confusing, the only students that are doing that are students that we brought back from online learning. It's not an across the board, or you weren't successful first semester in hybrid model. Like those we still have, everything's in place. This is specifically for students who are online, who are not successful. And it is oftentimes very hard to gauge if and what they got out of that math class. And that's why we didn't feel comfortable throwing them right on into second semester and going down some other roads. So it is a very specific group of students. It's not hundreds of students. It's not that full 200. It's a much smaller group of kids.
And then Jason, you didn't really get to talk about Pioneer, but now that
He's got a whole presentation.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that next?
No, he's got a whole presentation.
We're good.
I did Carson. I'm gonna.
Let me use that computer.
I don't know.
Where's
I'm backing out of your way, man.
I wanted to borrow AJ's giant laptop.
I got him warmed up.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. I thought you were just being quiet.
That
He's
can't be
just gonna
true.
say, yeah, what he said.
Good evening. It's working?
Yep.
President Casiopo, members of the board, thanks for having me. So Mr. Chambers wore you out, so I guess it'll be an easy time, right? Or not. I'll just go over a couple of things. There's a lot in your packet you can look at. Thanks. It's got our team commitment, our goals. The three areas I was going to focus on tonight were the ACT data, graduation data, and some school improvement. So for ACT, we tried some things out of the box this year. We switched to online testing, which was new for us, restructured the day, tried to change the tone of the test, and we worked more on school improvement alignment for ACT. So with that, we really, besides the big thing of going online, is we threw out all of our ACT prep last year. And it was an interesting result we had because of it. But before we get to that, some of the major challenges we have at Pioneer, if you can see on here, it's 78.9% transient students, as opposed to 14.2% of the district and 19.2% of the state. This is a huge challenge. This is pretty consistent over the years I've been here. That's just something we live with. So we have to tailor our interventions to kids who come and go. We don't have the luxury of 4 years with a student. We have very little time, and so we try to maximize that time. Our attendance is traditionally lower than the city and the state. That's always been a challenge, and obviously even more so now. One huge advantage is our class size. And so this is pre-COVID, this is last year. We're generally half the size of normal high schools for class sizes. And I think in COVID times, other teachers are now experiencing what we have been used to, having 12, 14 in a class. But that is a gigantic advantage, and you really need that for a school of students who are really struggling. So that's gigantic. So how'd we do? Last year, so ACT was definitely, we were very happy to see go from 2019, 3% were proficient in math, go to 10% in 2020. In science, we had 1% less. We had 8% in 2019 were proficient and went to 7%. English went from 14% proficient to 34%. Reading, 15% to 22%. And writing, huge, 2% proficient in 2019 to 27% proficient in 2020. On the average scores of ACT, in blue are the significant increases. So on this chart, every area did go up in every content area. And some of them were significant. And this is a report done by Dr. Steve Perdier. He looked at our scores and gave us back a school report. And these were noted as significant increases. So the first thing we want to know is why, and how did we do that, and how do we replicate that? The big thing is the paper pencil to online. So when we look at how kids are tested, our elementary school students, middle school, high school, or all the other levels are online. And then they get to the ACT and it's paper pencil, and it just didn't fit. And so that was one thing we decided to go out there and just do. And that, I believe, made a huge difference, is just the format alone. The time management's different. The day felt different. We embedded the breakfast, lunch, the breaks. It took a whole day instead of a half day. And just the typing of the students are used to typing, and the handwriting's atrocious. So that was a gigantic difference. You know, it's always hard to motivate our students who don't really want to go to college, and they're saying, why do I take the ACT? Why do I care? And that's always been a battle. We didn't really have any meltdowns this year. We did spread it out the entire day. We took their phones away the entire day. So it wasn't like I get to have my phone back at break. It just, that really helped. Telling them to relax, giving them some simple skills of, leave no question unanswered, those kind of things. But the tone was different. It wasn't hurry up and finish and leave school for a half day. That wasn't how it worked last year. So we're definitely going to replicate that and do it again. And I have to give kudos to Jeremy Lewis because we've been wanting to do online the testing and he made it happen. And so the staff all participated. They did a great job, but he really is the one that set that up, and kudos to him. So for additional context on school improvement, really, when you talk about ACT, it is a different group of kids every year, but what do you do at the school? Do you build a safe culture for constant improvement? Do you empower your staff? Do you focus on the right work? And we were focusing on weekly test prep for years and not really getting much of a bump. I mean, there was a little bit of a bump, but we got a significant bump up when we threw it all away and we just focused on what's going on in the classes. AVID is huge for organizational skills. So the things we did last year, besides format, obviously started working. Some career and college readiness things going on at Pioneer. We've got the AVID 9, we added AVID 10 and 12. We have a couple of communication courses that are dual credits. We have a couple of college prep, English and math, Jumpstart, jobs for Nevada's graduates, and then Project Lead the Way engineering. Okay. So a couple of the things that we were analyzing and what we did different last year was, besides throwing out the test prep, we were forcing kids to do that 90 minutes per week, 9 through 12. It didn't matter who you were. They hated it. We threw that all out the window. And I think with AVID really being school-wide, that really has helped kids, focusing on student metacognition, self-assessment, using our 4-point scale of grading. So for AVID, there's a focus on learning, focus on note-taking and summarizing, and a focus on Wicker. The test prep, the only real test prep they got was the basic, here's how the tools work, here's what it looks like online. That's the kind of practice they had, but otherwise it was happening in the classrooms. And this is a look at our 4-point grading scale. And we're in the second year of this. So a little bit about graduation. I put this in here just to give you some context. That was Carson City over the years. I don't know what the other counties look like. So we did take a dip on graduation. We were used to a good steady up by a couple percent, and then we did take a dip last year. We had 54 graduates, 15 non-graduates, and 37 transfers out. So I'll stop at this point. Are there any questions on graduation so far?
Jason, the same question that one of the trustees asked before. On your non-graduates, did you notice a trend of, did it kind of go off the edge after March, or did you notice anything like that?
I don't think so. I'd like to say it did, but I can't blame COVID for it. When we looked at our non-graduates, we really had just 2 kids that were affected directly by COVID, family-wise or just quitting. And the rest of the problems we had were normal problems. Kids who disappear, kids who don't enroll somewhere else, kids who just refuse to finish. We had the same issues, and really it was just 2 students that, when we look at the total list, I'm a little worried about this next group, because this is where you're going to see the effect of COVID, I think. But we're optimistic, and you know, the fact that you shut down in March and you only have 2 that are affected, we were happy about that. If you look traditionally from 2011 to where we are now, we're the purple line. So we've climbed the mountain. We still have a lot of work to do. The yellow line is the district average, and the top line is Carson High. So we have our work cut out for us. We're not done. This is how we look next to the state and Carson City. And so a couple years ago, we were right at the state average for graduation, and we dipped a little bit. State got higher, and then we went up a little bit in the last 2 years. So what did our graduates do at Pioneer, and who are they? We had 5 early graduates. It's really hard to calculate when kids are graduating early and they're in different cohorts, but I'll spell it out. We had 5 in the cohort of 2020, 2 early in 2021, and 4 summer grads. 7 were Jumpstart, 16 JAG students. We had 23 scholarships earned out of 56 graduates, which we were happy about that. 36 standard diplomas, 8 advanced, 2 honors, 5 adult, and then 2 were pandemic-related non-graduates. And that breakdown looks pretty normal year after year for Pioneer. We have a handful of honors and adult and advanced, and the bulk are standard. And this is what graduation looked like. We had celebrating the class of 2020. We had the drive-through, handoff, virtual presentation, live Zoom with your teachers, and then a dedication. So hopefully it will look more normal very soon. Questions on graduation?
On the 37 students that transferred out and you listed as non-graduates, do you know if they went on to some other school where they did graduate or they just never graduated at all?
We had 15 that were non-grads. And so a lot of times when you research, you won't find where they are at all. Sometimes they will go on to WNC and get their GED, and that's considered a dropout. And so that is unclear. We could do a better job tracking that down. Yep.
If they're local, maybe we would do it. But I mean, some of those kids move far away, and I'd much rather you focus on the kids you have, getting them the services they need. So I think within reason.
And just to share a couple stories, I mean, we have gone to restaurants where they work. You show them their diploma and say, hey, if you finish this one class, and I have to give credit to restaurant owners who will help us and will, tag team these students, and they have to want to do it. And, you can do all that, and our teachers do a tremendous job. But in the end, you're going to have a couple students that choose not to, but we have to convince them how important it is. So.
I just want to comment, thank you for encouraging the students to do the dual enrollment or the advanced placement. I see that numbers are pretty much the same. So it looks like there are, the students are interested in both programs. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And I just want to compliment you on the ACT score improvements because those are huge gains. And that just changed what you're doing there was clearly working last year. So good job.
Well, thank you. So this is the reason why. It's not me. This team right here. And what's nice about this team is a lot of this team has helped hire each other as part of the panel. So I definitely surround myself with smarter people than I am, and you listen to them. That's what I've learned to do. And our learning strategist, Jeremy Lewis, has been a huge help, gigantic. And I have to thank Mr. Stokes for letting us color outside the lines at Pioneer. We're pretty creative, and so we were always pushing the boundary. And Ms. Fuson for nudging us to Avid. That's been a big deal. I was kind of skeptical on Avid and then became a believer. It's definitely helping. So, but these folks right here, this is why it's happening. So just a final note on what we've done in scheduling in COVID. We started the year 50%, and we realized there's just no way we're going to be able to do this. We also realized we have room to bring back kids. So in October, we tried learning labs, and we said, if you'd like to come back, all 4 days, come on back. And then we encouraged them, and we had about 20% of the kids coming back. And then we took that idea, it was presented to me by a leadership member, Jeremy Lewis, took that to our leadership staff, and then took the idea to our entire staff, and they said, bring them all back. So if we can keep them 6 feet apart, let's do it. I had nobody even share a concern about it. And so we started that on January 19th, and that was going to be our test run. And so we see a lot of kids on campus right now. Was a shocker, but that needs to happen. And so as long as we can fit them in 6 feet apart, they need to be there. And so that's how scheduling has changed a little bit. Lunch is the biggest challenge. That the kids are hungry for, they just want socialization, and they're right next to each other, so you do your best. But otherwise, they're doing a good job with the masks.
Well, the adults are the same way, so I can only imagine what it's like at the schools.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions?
No, I think you guys are doing a great job. I mean, sometimes it's challenging, but I think your staff, kudos to your staff and to you. I mean, extend our thanks to them because, they're doing great work, and it's showing in some of these numbers. So, I'm real happy with what we're seeing over there.
Thank you very much. Will do.
All right, any other questions? All right, you guys win the award for combined longest presentation tonight.
I'll take it.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 13, discussion and possible action to approve proposed Carson City School District academic calendar for the 21-22 school year. This is for possible action. Tasha, take it away, please.
Thank you, President Casiopo. Tasha Fuson for the record. Good evening. It's that time of year when the Board of Trustees sets the school calendar for the following school year. Doing this in January affords our staff and our families the opportunity to plan in advance for travel, family events, graduations, etc. So as I go through the calendar, it's worthwhile to note that the proposed 2021-22 calendar looks more similar to the 2019-2020 calendar than it does from this school year. There are several tweaks, which I will point out. This proposed calendar has been posted to our website since January 5th for our community to look at. The proposed start date will be August 16th. That's the third Monday of August, which is in alignment with past practices. Just for information's sake, I did do and look up information for Washoe, Lyon, Douglas, and Clark. So Washoe starts on August 9th, Douglas starts August 9th, Lyon starts on August 18th, and Clark starts on August 9th. So we're about a week later than most of our the surrounding districts. Fall break is new this year. We had a loud request from administrators and teachers to consider looking at having a fall break, so the week of Thanksgiving off. So we are proposing to have that from November 22nd to the 26th. Washoe currently has only 3 days off. Douglas and Lyon are both going to have a full week for fall break that same week, and Clark only does the Wednesday through Friday, for comparison's sakes. On this proposed calendar, winter break is December 20th through January 3rd. We would come back in session on Tuesday, the 4th. All other districts that I mentioned have similar winter breaks. Only real difference is Washoe does have the Friday before off. They've had that off for quite some time. I'm not sure why, but they take that Friday, December 17th off. And Clark actually doesn't return until Wednesday, the 5th. Our proposed spring break is from April 11th to April 18th. Ours is anchored around Easter per family and community preferences. This is where you see quite a bit of difference in our districts. Washoe actually has a 2-week break from March 14th to the 25th of March, not aligned to Easter. Douglas is having their spring break from March 14th through the 18th, only 1 week, so the first week of Washoe's, they're aligned there. Lyon is April 4th through the 8th. That would be the week before our proposed. And then Clark County is actually proposing to have, or has the same spring break that we're proposing. Last day of school for our district would be Thursday, June 2nd. Washoe would end on June 3rd. Douglas finishes before the Memorial Day weekend on May 25th. Lyon finishes also on June 3rd, and Clark finishes on Wednesday, the 25th. Obviously, our intent, just for an FYI, is always to make sure that we end on a Wednesday or Thursday so that our high school, our comprehensive high school, has time to actually process and do credit checks on all their seniors. So that's a reason why we now try to not butt our last day of school up to that Friday. So their graduation would be on June 4th. Pioneers' graduation would be, as is their tradition, on Wednesday, June 1st. We do have 3 contingency days that will be built in, and that's June 3rd, 6th, and 7th. Our start and end times will remain the same for elementary and high schools. Our middle schools, as you've kind of heard through other realms, have had done some changes, actually lengthening their school day because of enrichment blocks. So I'm not quite sure if they'll be keeping that slightly extended school day next year or not, but just worthy to note for our families listening. While NRS allows for 5 professional learning days during the school year, we are actually only proposing for 4. So we use 1 less. It is 1 more than we have this year. So this year, in the last couple of years, we've only had 3. So we're looking to add 1 more professional learning days, but that's still less than the 5 that the state allows to use as in-seat days. And we're actually reducing the number of early release days. So last year we had 16 in this proposed schedule. We're going to have 9, which comes out to 1 a month. I will tell you that while I think it'll be good for our families, it does concern me for our teachers because, as you've heard, a lot of the work that they do requires them to work in PLC. So one of the suggestions we have made for our principals for secondary is that they look to designate 1 day a week for PLC time in the morning before school starts. And then try not to schedule IEPs or different other 504 meetings. Our elementaries have it a little bit easier because they can schedule common prep periods for the grade levels using their specialists. But in a secondary world, it's next to impossible to do that and have a balanced schedule. So I just want you to know that we want to take a look at that and said, okay, we'll do 1 early release a month instead of having the 16, but it's going to cut down on that time for our teachers. So again, that's another reason for adding the 4th professional learning day so that it's a full day event, and then it comes out to actually 1 professional learning day per quarter is what we're proposing. And then we still have new hire training scheduled for August 4th through the 6th. That is still a reduction of 1 day. So as you know, we've started with new hire training. It used to be 5, then we went down to 4. This year we had 3, and we're proposing 3 for next year. Some of that comes as a direct result of having reduced funding in grants that we've had in the past to support that program, but we feel it's still important to make sure that we have an orientation for new hires. So, and then lastly, if this calendar is approved by the board, we will send out the calendar to our community partners who base their programming around us, such as the Boys and Girls Club and the Community Center. And then all of our sites will be asked to post the calendar to their webpage and notify families. And then Dan Davis will, of course, help us do a big PR part in pushing that out. That being said, there was one other thing I just wanted to mention to the board. I did notice when I was researching our other surrounding districts that many of them actually put out 2, in some cases 3 years worth of school calendars. I don't know if that's something that this board wants to entertain. I am happy to bring a proposed 22-23 calendar this spring semester if you would like us to get more than 1 year ahead. So I just wanted to put that out for your consideration as well. But that is the calendar that we are proposing for the upcoming school year.
Great, thank you very much. I think, a lot goes into these calendars. I remember when I first came on the board and I was talking to Sue Kima And I would ask her, what about this? What about that? And she sat down one time and we kind of went through it, and it takes a lot. So, personally, I'm fine with the calendar a year and not projecting ahead, because it seems like the farther ahead we project, things are going to change, whether it's in a legislative session or something else, to where I'd hate for you or anybody else to put forth effort that, you wind up having to go back and revisiting certain things. So if you think there's a benefit to it, I'm all ears, but just in my personal thought is I'm happy with the way it's been presented. Anyway, this is an action item.
I'll move that we accept the calendar as presented.
Lupe's trying.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike, second by Lupe. Any board discussion? Hearing none. Any discussion from the public?
Seeing no public comment online?
Not a lot of in-person public, so. Renee, any on your end?
No public comment, Mr. Cassiopolo?
All right, seeing no public comment, we'll call it. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Calendar passes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 14. Discussion and review of possible amendment of CCSD bylaw 050 organization. This is a first reading for discussion only. Superintendent Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. At our last meeting, as the trustees had an opportunity to reorganize the leadership, one of those annual events is a reaffirmation of the bylaws that the board operates by. As we were preparing the agenda for that particular meeting, we came across bylaw 050, which identifies the different committees and working groups to which trustees are assigned. By looking at that list, I saw that there were two committees that were essentially not being utilized and hadn't been utilized for some time. One was the Board Policy Review Committee, and the other one was the Wellness Committee. And in fact, these two committees had, or at least the work that was represented by these committees were being done in different ways. And so at the time, I thought it would be a good idea to present this to the board to just simply see if there was any appetite to make any changes in the bylaws, or to at least invite an opportunity for discussion, so that if it was the will of the board to keep these items, that we maybe look at them again and reconsider how they are structured and how we would possibly like to use them in the future. So at this point, I would turn the time back over to you, Mr. President, for any discussion that might be associated with bylaw 050.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stokes. So yeah, I'll open it up to the board. If anyone has any thoughts, we're talking about, as it's listed here, number 4, Board Policy Review Committee, and number 9, Wellness Committee, which were recommended to be stricken. But does any board members have any comments on this? Oh, Lupe's trying to hit the button again.
I do, President Casiopo. So I expressed interest in serving on the Board Policy Committee at our last meeting. And my rationale behind this is because we recognize that our student demographic is rapidly changing. And so we recognize that we are serving a more diverse community. I feel that it is important to the existence of the committee to help us stay on track with issues that arise. And I do feel that it is important to review them and make sure that they are current. So that we can better address any issues, brought to our attention. And so that was my rationale to keep this committee. So that's my recommendation. But of course, I want to hear what other members of the board suggest.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other members of the board? Rich?
Just curious, Mr. Stokes, how long has it been since that committee has been active?
The Wellness Committee has actually not been operational, oh, wow. I would say probably the last 5 years, and that has, that work is being currently done by, is it Goal 3, Mr. Fueling? Healthy Generations of Carson City Students. And so we're actually doing that work as a result of the Community PLC. The other committee, Board Policy Review Committee, one of the challenges that we've encountered with this particular one is the scope of the assignment. So if we are trying to look at our entire board policy and regulation, then would the committee be working on trying to review all of the policies, or would it just be for those policies that, as staff works through their daily work effort, are we trying to then enact those changes that come through either state or federal regulation changes, or is there, some other reason that there's a need to change? And so because of just the sheer volume, we had adopted more of a practice of when staff came into to encounter a need to change, then we would bring those events or those policies and regulations to the trustees, like what you saw tonight. So if you were just reviewing tonight's events, Board Policy 817 would have been something that this group could have looked at prior to coming to the full body of the board. But there's a variety of ways that I think we could continue to keep it operating, but I think it would be very helpful for it to be meaningful that we identify what the scope of the committee is, rather than saying we're going to try to look at all of the documents, because I think truly it would take you more than 1 year to look at all of the policies.
So, Mr. Stokes, if, Lupe, when I'm thinking about your request, one of the things that comes to mind is all of these policies go before us. So we have 2 readings, and so we're able to vet those for those concerns at that time, which is what we're still going to have to do anyway with that committee. So I think that just because of the fact that we're so hands-on with these policies anyway, we could just make that a practice of when they come up and voice those suggestions in the first reading and allow staff to kind of get those in the policy. And then the second one, when we vote on it, we can make sure it says it reflects what we'd like it to reflect.
Yeah, I think, I understand Lupe's point. I appreciate that, and I think it's important to make sure that in these changing times, we're keeping up on it. But I was thinking the same thing Richard just brought up is, if we were to actively go through these, we wouldn't be able to get through them all, or we'd have a struggle getting through them all. And I think even with best efforts, we wouldn't get there. I kind of like the way, and plus it would also probably, we'd be engaging staff at a higher level, which probably takes away from some of what they're doing. But I think we also have the ability, when we talk about future agenda items and whatnot, if we feel like, hey, we haven't talked about something in a while and, this is timely, or this is coming up, or this has been concerning me, we can bring those up and get those on an agenda and bring that policy or those policies to the forefront. And we might be able to do that more efficiently that way than having kind of a, hey, we're going to go through all the policies and then, how do we do that? Just my thought.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to overlook anything. I think if there's something important that needs to be addressed, I want to make sure we're proactive in having it brought to the board. Any other comments on the board? Laurel?
Button going here. Just with the wellness committee, I remember a few years ago, before when not the most recent nutrition contract that we entered, but when it went out to bid the years before, it was the Wellness Committee who reviewed that bid. I don't remember the whole expression, the phrase for it right now. Is that the best place to review? Is the PLC Wellness Committee the best place to review that, or are we doing those type of reviews in a different format than through the Wellness Committee?
I believe our
We're doing the food ones. There's an actual committee that does the RFP, and that committee meets every year to go over the nutrition stuff. Not the wellness committee.
And I might just add a little bit to that. It was probably 3 sessions ago when there was a formal move to require all of the districts to have a wellness council. And that was about the time, you'll probably remember the cupcake wars when we, we went through the different conditions that reduced what parents or families could bring into the schools and what children could eat at school. And there were some reporting requirements that were associated with that effort. And that's still a requirement that the district has. And that was probably the key condition that was used with the wellness committee. But we've actually been able to assimilate that process through our community PLC process as well. So we're still required to submit that report, but it's just done in a different format.
Any additional
This is
questions?
Stacy.
Stacy, go ahead.
This is Stacy again. My only concern about taking the wellness committee and putting it in a PLC is we don't have a person assigned to that. And if we're going to take the wellness committee and put it in the PLC, is there any appetite for the other 4 aspects of the strategic plan to have a representative there?
So, Mr. President, if I could respond
Sure.
to Trustee Wilkie, and really to the board in general. So members of my staff, and that includes me, are seated in those individual goals of the strategic plan as the chairperson. And so each of those individuals, if there are specific requirements like the wellness committee had previously, then Mr. Fueling is the person on my staff that has supervision over that group and over that part of the strategic plan. So he, in essence, would be overseeing that specific work.
Stacy, any
I don't
additional comments?
I don't see a danger in kind of consolidating what we're doing and streamlining the process. I think that just extra meetings that are then going to still have to come before us twice are cumbersome for the district, cumbersome for us. And I think that we're going to have some real big issues to tackle here in the coming years. So I think that probably it's our best bet to approach it kind of like Joe had said, where if we see something that's concerning us, we could bring it before us at a meeting of the board and ask for those revisions and not have additional meetings that are going to trigger that same thing anyway. We could probably kind of cut to the chase a little bit quicker, just streamlining it and bringing those issues that are to the forefront.
Okay, is everybody, this is just a discussion topic, but everybody comfortable with that? Seeing a bunch of head nods. Okay. So I think, do we have to bring this back to the board for an official motion on getting rid of, eliminating those
So,
two?
Mr. President, members of the board, if indeed there is a desire to modify bylaw 050, it would take one more reading.
Right.
And action by the board. Tonight's interaction was just for discussion only.
Yeah, so that said, I think we'll add that to a future agenda as you see fit, and we'll get that in front of the board for action. Okay, thank you. Item 15, what we've all been waiting for, is presentation and discussion on budget assumptions for the Carson City School District for fiscal year 21-22 by Andrew Fueling, and this is for discussion only. AJ.
Thank you, President Casiopo, board members. I am happy to come on here at the last agenda item. I feel bad for the Carson High student representative. She almost made it to the most exciting part of the meeting. So
That's a sign of COVID that she sat here, because normally she's got to have something better to do.
Yeah. So I also feel bad because I guess about a month and a half ago, I went through a rather lengthy presentation with you on kind of a budget assumption, revenue assumption for this coming school year. And it seems all for naught to a great extent, as in the last week, things have changed pretty dramatically and likely will be changing given the legislative session that we are now ready to ramp up into. So I'll discuss that a little bit, explain what's going on. This will be, I think, rather short, but just hit a couple points and didn't have time for questions. Okay, so the fiscal year 22 budget. So the timeline, this is pretty standard each year. In February, we will receive from the Department of Taxation preliminary revenue projections. And then in March, we get final projections on local revenues, so property taxes, local school support tax, and the government services tax. I have these highlighted in red just to remind me to say that these actually weren't really supposed to matter this year. Going into the new year, these were all supposed to become a part of the larger state pot of money. So getting those projections, I wasn't as concerned as kind of the larger pot of money that's been talked about at the state level. With changes that have been proposed by the governor, these actually will matter again. And actually they matter a lot because of our current understanding of the way that the governor has proposed changes. In April 13th, that board meeting will be presenting the tentative budget. As always, that is for discussion and getting your feedback, but not for approval. Once that is presented to you, we submit that to the Department of Taxation 2 days later. At the last board meeting in May, we will present the final budget, the final original budget, which is for approval, and that will be the tentative budget with any modifications that have been suggested in that time. And then by June 8th, that is due to the state. So as of right now, that is the timeline. There is talk of changing this timeline going into the next year. Clark County has pushed for quite a while to try to get some of this changed, and I think it may actually have some footing. So it'll be interesting to see how this comes out of the session. My favorite quote that I always start this presentation with, and I just bring it back: there are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know by Donald Rumsfeld, who was Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush and under Jerry Ford. So the unknown unknowns, you can't know the unknown unknowns, but being a legislative year with a lot clearly still going on with the Nevada economy and the national economy, we would expect maybe more to come there. So the known unknowns, last week was a pretty eventful week for me. The governor unexpectedly recommended a change to the pupil-centered funding plan, which is the new funding model that we've been talking about for about 2 years now. He recommended a phase-in approach, and the full implementation would then start with the following biennium, so the 23 to 25 biennium. The Department of Education presented the education budget to the Legislative Budget Subcommittee last Friday and gave a little more detail on this along with some numbers. And they tried to explain the new phase-in and provide some preliminary funding amounts, which I'll talk a little bit more in a bit. So the phase-in, again, the full implementation now would be another biennium away. What will happen this year is, like I mentioned, in the new model, your local revenues, your local school support tax, your property taxes, your government services tax, all really become a part of the state's revenues. They become a part of the larger state pot for distributing funds out to schools. And so the phase-in is effectively not doing that with the local part, and it's just distributing state aid through this new formula to the schools. The hold harmless would still be in effect that we've discussed. That would only be applied to the state aid amount. So the amount of state aid, and I have a little graph that I think will help a bit. The amount of state aid that the state gives out, which is I think about 1.6 billion. That amount will go into the formula that has been created and then be distributed out. But we would still keep our local revenues. Special education, I think I mentioned this before, has been taken out of the calculation so that the weighting that was supposed to be attributed to that area will no longer be there. We'll still receive special education aid, but it's not running through the formula. So the local revenues that stay with the district, the big change, and it's a really big problem, I think, is that they are not guaranteed. So since the inception of the Nevada plan in 1971, it started, the revenue, the per pupil amount that we are always laser focused on as a district, and all districts are, it's also referred to as the per pupil guarantee. Okay, so it's this dollar amount that via contributions of your local revenues and your and state aid, you are guaranteed a certain amount of funding of those two combined pots. If, let's say, in total, that worked out to about $1 million, or let's say on a per pupil basis, that was $8,000. And let's say 4,000 came from state aid and 4,000 came from local revenues. If your local revenues increased to say $4,001 per pupil because local school support tax came in a little bit better than expected, the state would drop by $1 what it gives you per pupil. But it's vice versa. So if your local revenues came in at $3,999, the state would kick in an extra $1. By local revenues not being guaranteed, that would not happen. So it's much easier for districts and dependable for districts to budget on guaranteed revenue. So hopefully that would not be an issue, but let's say that there was, like a global pandemic or something like that happened and would somehow impact local revenues because people would have to stay inside for a year. That could be a big problem because we're still obligated to provide the services to all the students that are here. Yet, if those local revenues came in lower than expected, the state would not be making up the other part of that. So that's something that, as the session progresses, we'll have to keep an eye on. A lot more to learn. The Commission on School Funding meets on next Thursday and Friday. We're now having 2-day-a-week meetings again. And this will be a big topic of discussion. This change was not something that we were aware of or expecting So it's caused a lot of discussion. There's also another problem with what has been set up that I think will be talked about and probably will need to change, is that there's no local wealth adjustment built into the aid distribution. And so the example is in every single state that has a funding formula, one of the basic fundamentals of every formula is that the amount of local wealth will adjust how much aid you get from the state. So if you are a really wealthy district, high property taxes, high local school support tax, whatever, the state will give you less money because there's an offset there. If you are locally wealthy, the state won't give you as much because they're trying to provide this common ground to all the students in the state. If you're a really poor district, vice versa, you would get more state aid. So the way this now is set up, they're distributing state aid purely based on need of the students, which it's good that that is reflected, but it doesn't in any way now take into account local wealth. And so that, I think, is going to be a problem that the state is probably going to have to work through. I don't know that will, it can continue that way. I think they're still going to have to maybe make some adjustments. So the bottom line is that usually in this presentation, I'll kind of give you an updated, here's what I think the revenue number is going to be. And again, that I don't feel comfortable even giving the number that we've been told at this point, because I don't really think it's going to stay. I think it's probably going to change again. So I'll talk about some other things that we maybe know a little bit more about. And I'll take it. Are there any questions about that at the moment, or? Okay. So this is just a breakdown of the current, for the current year, the revenues that we budgeted. So we have about 70% local revenues, 30% state. When I got here almost 7 years ago, this was almost, I think, 50-50. So local revenues clearly have improved. Property taxes over time have come back. Local school support taxes come back dramatically. So that's made a big difference. But again, if 70% of your revenues, it's actually a little bit scarier for us, I think, because of this. If your local revenues don't come in where you're budgeting, that's a big part of our budget. So that is, again, something that we're just going to have to keep an eye on over these next couple months as that develops. Again, the Department of Taxation will be getting us revenue projections here. And the March ones are really the ones that we're the most worried about. So it'll be interesting to see. And truly this year, local revenues have tracked much better than expected. I thought, given the last 3 months of fiscal 20, which was kind of the beginning of COVID, that March, April, May, June, local, not really property tax, but local school support tax and government services tax just dropped. And those really have this year come back pretty well and have tracked really well throughout the year. So that's been a good sign for the local economy. But again, they're not going to be guaranteed by the state. So the legislature, we still, I think there will still be a different state aid amount that comes to us. But again, we will most definitely be in a hold harmless state. So there will be some total dollar amount that we are told that this is how much state aid you're going to get. And again, it's not per pupil, so it doesn't matter how many kids we have. We could add 50 kids next year and we'd still have the same amount. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works with just this change that's come up. So enrollment will not determine your funding level, which we have never experienced that before. And enrollment is difficult to forecast otherwise. We've lost a number of students this year, as you know, a lot of them to homeschooling or private schools. So we do expect some to come back. I have some expectation for a larger kindergarten class than we've seen, because our kindergarten class dropped pretty significantly this year. And I think a lot of parents, because kindergarten is not required in Nevada for 5-year-olds, so parents just figured, I'm going to keep my kids home one more year. So I would, normally our last couple kindergarten classes have been in the low 500s, it's trended down over time. So I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a class in the upper 500s, kind of reflecting some of those students that stayed home. Class size reduction funding. So what's interesting about this is, well, actually, I'll just jump to the next slide. Or I have another slide I'll come back to. So we have the federal stimulus funds. We do know that funds are coming. We don't know how much. We don't know what strings are attached. We have some idea, but it hasn't been formally laid out for us yet. So that's something that is definitely on the horizon, but we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like yet. Known knowns. I am certain we will have school next year. And that's about all I have. So we will move on then to the assumptions. So this is the slide I was referring to before. So kind of the unique thing, and we've talked about this a bit, you have all these state grants that are going to be rolling up into the general fund in fiscal 22. So this is the list on the left of all the grants that will cease to exist. So any programs that you have associated with kind of this specialized categorical grant funding, that will no longer be there. It's all just going to be wrapped up into the general fund. What was expected to happen, if the economy was better, is that this funding would move over, would move over generally dollar for dollar into the new pot. And in looking at the detail of the governor's budget, and through Indy's presentation, some of these grants, the dollars amount associated with them, are being reduced and then put into the general fund. So for example, the funds coming from class size reduction statewide, I think class size reduction receives about $150 million, and that is being cut in half before it is then being moved into the state education fund that will become the general fund for school districts. So it'll be interesting to see how these amounts may still change. It's just the governor's recommended budget. The legislature still will be doing their work, but it's just going to be a time will tell, I think, with all of these. Overall expense assumptions, so looking at...
AJ, if I could,
Oh,
before we
yeah.
move from that slide, if it's going to be just one pot of money and all these grants are going away that was for certain programs, is that giving the district more flexibility in how to spend that money, or are they still going to have all these programs they want done?
So at this point, there is no indication that any of the requirements related to any of these grants would go away. I would hope, politically it's hard because there's groups of people supporting each one of these, right? And truly all of them do good for our students. I wouldn't be surprised. So back in during the recession, not this one, the last one, the state gave waivers on a number of items, like on class sizes. They allowed a slight increase in class sizes. And there are a couple others that aren't as important now. But I think if anything, you would see that potentially they would give us a couple waivers on this to maybe allow a slight bump in class size, or I don't know, with read by 3, maybe some of the requirements there that have to be done, that somehow it's eased for a little while to help with for our staff and to manage. But as far as I know at this point, nothing has actually changed yet. On the expense side, really high level, looking at the current cost of all of our staff, and again, staffing is about 80 to 85% of all of our costs. Across all of our funds, if you look at the value of our folks getting their steps, so recognizing another year of service, the value of 2% negotiated salary increase, the slight increase that we've now been notified with PERS, and the maximum health insurance increase that we are guaranteed this year is 9%. So the total value of all that is about $2.6 million. Of that, about $1.9 million is in the general fund. It's hard to make you cannot make a comparison of those dollar amounts from this current year to next year because of moving all those grant-funded people into the general fund. So this is assuming, like, for saying that the general fund is 1.9 million, it's just taking all those grant-funded people and just effectively assuming that they were in the general fund this year. What would it cost as an increase into next year? So I don't know how meaningful that number is. I think in the bigger picture, the 2.6 million is probably a more meaningful number. But clearly that's a significant increase for the district. On the non-staffing side, for years, we've had little to no increase in operating budgets, and that's kind of where our starting point will be this year. I don't know if that will be able to hold. We may have to look at decreasing some operational budgets across the district. We, at this point, would be budgeting for the Cops and Schools grant, which is the original 3 school resource officers that we had since, I think, 2015 or 2016, through a grant that Sheriff Furlong helped put together. And then we'll also have to talk about technology replacement again with Chromebooks this year. So it's a little early working through some of this. And again, maybe some of the federal grants, federal funds that'll come in can help us with some of these things. But at this point, we're just not quite sure. So, and that's all I have. And I thought I would be really slick. And for my last slide, I was going to say this is a live shot from outside right now, and it's not snowing. So I have failed there. But are there any questions on any of that? I know it's getting late, but happy to answer anything.
Well, even if we had questions, it doesn't sound like you have many answers. So it's probably best to just wait until you have more information.
Yeah, I think that is the truth, Trustee Walker, for sure.
Yeah, there's constantly so many unknowns, and right now they're increasing. So I agree with Trustee Walker. I think, why speculate? Let's wait till we know a little bit more, and then we can dig into it a bit.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from the board? All righty.
All right,
Hearing
thank
none.
you.
Thank you, AJ. All right, we're going to move on to item 16, approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Okay, we have a motion. We have second by Trustee Varner. Any discussion? Any public discussion?
See no public comment online?
Thank you. Renee?
No public comment, Mr. Cassioppo.
All right, thank you. We'll call a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Approved. Item 17, informational items for discussion only. They're on here if anyone has any questions. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 18, requests for future agenda topics. At this time, I'm not seeing any by the board. All righty, I'll just make a reminder that depending on what happens with the, as we talked about under, I forgot what number it was. Excuse me. With the committees we were talking about, if any of those come up in the future, we have the ability to ask for more information. So at this point, last item is adjournment. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.